There's only 5 of us on this camping trip. We keep counting 6. There were bright flashes of red in the sky. It's as if someone was waving around a flare light from space, faint but noticeable. We all made UFO jokes and laughed as we nailed our tents into the ground. I knew for sure that there were 5 of us. We have all been friends since early middle school and were celebrating our high school graduation with this getaway camping trip. The flashes of red must have stopped randomly as we made conversation while fixing up our tents. Dave managed to put his tent together the fastest and told us he was going to find some branches for the fire. I remember how he had worked with me at the local gas station last year. We used to do the night shift together and it had made working at a desolate gas station much more fun than it was supposed to be. There was also Eric in the corner still reading his tent manual, fidgeting with his signature round glasses. I wasn't as close with Eric as I was with the others, but I still remember sitting with him in math class and copying his homework one time. Ava was also there talking with Sally, my cousin. Both had decided to team up and work on one tent at a time. I also have clear memories of them, hanging around at school in our usual places. In fact, I even knew Ava's younger brother as he used to beg to go with us wherever we went. I bring all this up because I'm sure that there were 5 of us including me and that I knew everyone in the group. So Dave had went to get some branches as we pulled out some foldable chairs and set them up around the fire pit. I remember feeling uneasy as the sun set and darkness began to consume the forest. The shadows of trees elongated around us as the minutes ticked by. Eric went to get a flashlight from his bag while we wondered what was taking Dave so long. He appeared soon after, the harsh rustling sounds of the bushes signifying his return. We were all buried in our chairs at this point, covered by our jackets. The temperature had dropped quickly and a slight breeze was beginning to pick up. "Geez, you guys weren't even bothered to pull out a chair for me," Dave said as he arranged all the branches in the pit. We had set up 5 chairs around the fire. I tried to rationalize the situation, but no matter how hard I focused, my head felt like it was underwater. I had perfect clarity up until that moment, but when I tried to focus on why 5 chairs were occupied when Dave hadn't sat down yet, my head seemed to just stop working as if something was reaching in and pulling out my thoughts. Instinctually, I felt even more uneasy now, and I had placed why. The whole forest had gone dead silent. I looked around at the faces of the others and could tell that they had felt the same. Eric was fidgeting with his fingers, trying to scan around the group and spot the extra person, but it was futile. I scanned every face, each etched in worry and frowning in frustration except for, "It's all right, I'll get the chair myself," Dave said, breaking the silence and somewhat alleviating the tension. I got up and offered to help him. He looked into my eyes and nodded knowingly. We headed away from the fire pit towards the tents, but I kept my eyes glued on our group. "How many people are here?" I whispered to Dave as he looked around and realized that we had indeed only packed 5 chairs. In fact, every person had brought with them their own chair. They were heavy to carry and we wouldn't bring any extra needlessly. "There's 5, right?" "I mean there's 5 chairs," Dave replied. His voice wavered as he spoke. "No, I just think maybe one of us forgot our chair," I said. My mind was struggling to address the issue head-on and now sought to find rational excuses instead. I didn't quite feel in control of my thoughts. It felt like swimming in a dream, and if I tried to force myself to think about who the 6th person was, my head would begin to throb. "Yeah, that sounds about right actually," Dave said, relaxing and heading back to the group. When we walked back to the fire pit and circle of chairs, 2 chairs were empty. 1 for me and 1 for Dave. Everything was adding up now, even though we all agreed it wasn't before. Sally suggested we were all probably tired after the long hike to get here and probably just needed some sleep. She could have been right. We were all sleep deprived from waking up very early today to make it on time. Ava brought out the drinks. The whole 6-pack was emptied. We all moved closer to the crackling fire for warmth as we took sips from our cans and reminisced on memories of last year. Ava was in the middle of telling us about that one time she was home alone with weird things happening in her house when I got these sudden chills despite the pleasant warmth of the fire. What felt cozy and safe moments ago felt wrong now, all because I realized that there was a crucial detail I missed. "Who started the fire?" I asked, completely interrupting Ava in the middle of her story and breaking everyone else's immersion. Everyone looked momentarily annoyed until they realized they had no answer. Once again I scanned the faces staring back at me. All barely illuminated by the light from the fire. All familiar and pale from fear. "Wasn't it you, Dave?" Eric. Dave shook his head. "I think the person standing behind Jenny did it," Sally said, looking over at me. I whipped my head around so quickly it hurt. My heart was pounding in my ears. There was nothing behind me except for the encompassing darkness of the woods. Staring at those tall dark trees behind me made me feel exposed. I felt like a lost bird in a vast field. Wait, I don't know, Sally said. Her eyes had gone wide and she was shaking visibly. She continued to look around frantically as Ava moved over to her, placing her hands on her shoulders and trying to calm her down. I think we should leave this place, Ava stuttered. Yeah, something just doesn't feel right, but I can't put my finger on it, Dave said. But it's so dark out in the forest now, we'd probably get lost if we leave now, someone else said. Yeah, I think we should stay the night and leave as soon as we can tomorrow, Eric agreed. I tried to protest but realized Eric was right. The woods harbored an oppressive darkness within which navigation would be near impossible. Let's not sleep in our separate tents just to be safe, Sally said. We all agreed. We only brought one person tents with us, but we could squeeze two if we tried. That way no one would be alone at night. Following this conversation, we all got up and made our pairs. I went with Dave and Sally, like always went with Ava. Eric kept complaining that he didn't have a pair, but we reassured him he did. He wouldn't accept it. I feel like at some point we all realized that there were only 5 of us and suddenly we were all huddling up in the middle of the clearing. Why do we keep thinking there are 6 of us here? Eric asked. Sweat was dripping down his face despite the cold. We had nearly left him all alone on his own under the assumption that there was another person. My stomach turned as I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to mentally recap everyone here. My head throbbed, but I kept pushing it. There's me, Dave, Eric, Ava, Sally, and... I was pointing at each of them as I said the name. I retched and emptied the contents of my stomach on the ground when I got past Sally. The left side of my head felt like there was a knife stuck in it. My vision was blurry. Dave held me up to stop me from collapsing, and we all wordlessly started to move towards the tents as someone put the fire out. Dave helped me into a tent while the 4 outside discussed what to do. I could only focus on snippets of the conversation as the excruciating pain beating against my skull came and went in waves. Sally had the brilliant idea of arranging 3 tents together so their openings faced together at right angles in a sort of U shape so we could sleep as close as possible and also limit the entrance to our tents. Dave was about to go to help as they worked outside, but I clutched his hand and asked him to stay with me. The tents took some time to arrange. I started to feel a bit better once everyone got settled into their tents. A quick head count confirmed there were 5 of us. Eric would have to sleep in his tent alone, but he was more comfortable with it. Since all the tents were very close now. Looking back now, I think he was just trying to put a brave face on for us. I regret that moment deeply, letting him sleep in his tent alone. He was always less integrated in our group and knew that none of us would pair with him. Just before going to bed, we all agreed to leave as soon as the sun rose in the morning. I remember taking one last look outside the tent into the forest before trying to fall asleep. The wind had picked up and the tree branches were swaying gently. Beyond our clearing was just pure darkness. It felt like the trees were closing in on me. With the faint moonlight illuminating our clearing, I turned my head to look over at the 2 tents we had left out and saw someone standing next to them. Despite the circumstances, sleep came quickly and easily. Ava's shrill scream woke me up in the middle of the night. Dave and I ripped our tent door open to find Sally and Ava looking into Eric's tent. We pushed them aside. Eric's sleeping bag was rolled up. He was still inside it. His head in the center, face contorted in utter agony. The rest of his body rolled around it with the blue fabric now dripping with dark blood. Dave zipped up the door of the tent. Ava was in shock. Her eyes had become glassy and unfocused. Sally was shaking her repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Dave picked up his torch and yelled at us to get up and run. We left the campsite behind and entered the trail we had come from. The 5 of us huddled together, Dave leading in the front as he cast his weak flashlight over the path so we could see it. All we had to help us get through this 2-hour trail was a small white circle of light. Even the moon failed to illuminate our surroundings through the dense foliage. Ava tripped and fell, twisting her ankle. We came to a stop. Someone said they knew how to splint it so we could keep going. They dragged her into the woods instead. It happened too quickly for any of us to process. Sally was about to run after Ava when Dave held her back. She struggled and managed to free herself, running into the trees to follow the echoes of Ava's screams. I was about to run after her, but Dave held me by the shoulders and shook me hard. "We need to get out of here, Jenny, please," he said. I hesitated but jolted into motion again when Sally's voice was cut off abruptly. She had been calling out Ava's name as she ran after her. Dave and I continued to run down the trail, trying to get to our car so we could get out of here. There was nothing we could do. At some point there were 3 of us running on the trail, Dave and I shoulder to shoulder while someone followed us closely behind. "Dave, who's behind us?" I gasped. My heart was threatening to burst through my ribcage and my legs burned. He turned to look at me. Confusion transformed into fear on his face and then into rage. "You keep running," he told me as he produced a pocket knife from his pants. He handed me the car keys, which I nearly dropped. Then he turned around suddenly and jumped at whoever was behind us. I continued to run in fear. As the sounds of a struggle grew behind me, I tripped and tumbled through the trail for what felt like hours. I didn't allow myself to stop. I almost cried when the trail ended and I walked out into the familiar car park. Not wasting a second, I ran to the car and started it up, accelerating out of that forest and onto the highway within mere seconds. My roommate has been in the shower for more than 4 hours. So I got home at around 11 p.m. Late night at the office turned into an even later night at the bar. About 4 drinks deep at this point and I'm tired, just about ready to fall asleep as I stumble through the doorway. I lay down on the couch and reach for my bag of joints and spark one up as I pull YouTube on my laptop. I'm in the middle of watching some luxury cruise tour, close passing out when I hear the front door open. I sit up and turn my head slightly, just enough to see my roommate coming in. He hangs his jacket in the closet and doesn't say anything and walks slowly to his room, which is normal enough. I'd been living with him for about 3 months, long enough for me to pick up on most of his tendencies. The guy really doesn't talk unless spoken to, which was far from a problem for me. He also generally kept things clean on his end, never causing much in the way of problems. I really couldn't complain. So I go back to watching YouTube and about 5 minutes later I hear the shower in his room turning on. Once again, nothing strange. At this point, I'm watching bare-knuckle boxing highlights with my eyes half open, maybe 1 or 2 minutes away from passing out. I remembering waking up in darkness, my head hurting, my throat dry as hell. I sat up slowly, waiting for the grogginess to settle into something manageable. Once it did, I grabbed my phone, checked the time. Around 3:30 a.m. from what I remember. I was starving and so I got up, began walking towards the fridge. And then I noticed it. A soft, but ever-present noise in the background. It took me a few seconds to really recognize what it was. The shower. Suddenly the events of last night began replaying in my head. Drinking at the bar, Ubering home, laptop, couch. My roommate coming home. The shower turning on. I stood there for a while trying to make sense of it. Maybe he went to bed and forgot to turn it off? I shook my head. There's no way that happened, I thought. Maybe he slipped and fell? Realizing the implications of this, I rushed towards his room but found his bathroom door locked. I began pounding on it. "Hey man, you alright?" No response. I considered kicking the door down but decided to call 911 before I did that. I took my phone out, preparing to dial when I noticed that I had an unread text. One from my roommate. "Hey man, I couldn't sleep so I went over to my girlfriend's place. Not sure when I'll be back. Sent 2 hours ago." I look at the bathroom door, then back down at my phone. Everything about this was wrong. First of all, my roommate barely texts me, and certainly never to tell me that he's going out. Second of all, I know for a fact that he's single and has been for a while. And third of all, who the fuck was in the shower then? I tried calling him. No answer. Sent him some texts but no response. I walked over to his desk and saw that his keys and wallet were still beside his laptop. My head's starting to spin at this point and I get out of there, go back into the living room and turn on the lights. I'm pacing around in a circle, trying to follow the plot while also trying to ignore the shower, a noise that I never could have imagined being so dreadful in any context. Sometime later, I hear something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I move towards it and see that it's a phone. My roommate's phone. The panic begins setting in and immediately I grab my keys and run out of the apartment. I make my way down the hall and take the stairs down to the lobby, but even that doesn't seem far enough away, and so I make my way over to the McDonald's across the street. I sit there for a while, considering calling the cops but for some reason feeling too nervous to do so. But even though there's hardly anybody in there, the place begins to feel suffocating, and I decide to leave, walking back out onto the empty streets. Almost immediately I get this feeling that I'm being watched, and I feel my gaze drifting up and towards the apartment. Soon I'm looking at my balcony and I see somebody standing there. A dark figure stood completely straight, stiff to the point where it nearly resembles a mannequin, but it isn't one. If I look closely, I can see it just slightly swaying. I froze in place, my mind hardly able to understand or accept what it was seeing. It's not my roommate. It's too tall. In fact, it's too tall to be anybody I know, its head nearly scraping the bottom of the balcony above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any of its details. The darkness and distance may have been enough to explain that away. But there was something about it that drove me towards a different conclusion, that this thing simply possessed no details that could have been observed, that the only element of its composition was that of unadulterated darkness. Of course, my gut instinct was to get the hell away from it. But the voice in my head was telling me that if I were to try and run, this thing would end up following me. I went back into the McDonald's instead, locking myself in the bathroom as I finally dialed 911. I told the operator that somebody had broken into my place but that I had gotten out of there without them noticing, but that they were still in there. It was the story that most accurately represented the situation without making me come across as Bat's hit. The operator told me that they'd be sending somebody over for me to hang tight. I left the bathroom, waiting at the table closest to the exit until I could see the red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. I went outside to meet the cops, looking up at the balcony to find it empty, though the door to the living room had been left open. They pelted me with a bunch of questions that I found difficult to answer. Is the intruder armed? Do I have an idea who it might be? What are their intentions? I told them I didn't know, that I couldn't figure it out, but they just kept on asking. Soon I was practically yelling at them to go up there and check it out for themselves, and I suppose the terror in my voice was enough for them to begin taking this seriously. They told me to wait by the entrance, and I watched on as they entered the building. I was out there for a long time, growing increasingly anxious at the thought of what they were going to tell me when they came down. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by a single, muffled gunshot. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I continued to wait there, unsure of what to do otherwise. 20 more minutes of silence, and the officers still hadn't come down. Soon I could hear more of them approaching in the distance. Before I knew it, 4 more cop cars had pulled up around me, and the scene had fallen into chaos. Officers shouting over each other and into their radios, more questions being hurled my way, none of which I was able to answer. The next few sequences were mostly a blur, but I remember the building being evacuated, the tenants frightened and confused as they were ushered outside while the officers became more and more frantic. I remembered hearing more scattered gunshots, some screaming, other noises that were difficult to make sense of. There were a few lapses in my memory after that, but I recall being pushed into the back of a police car. After being driven to the station, I was led into one of the interrogation rooms, where I found 2 nondescript men in suits waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves and immediately went into a series of questions, each one more bizarre than the last. What company was your roommate employed by? What was the nature of his job? How many different people have been inside your apartment since your roommate moved in? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? Voices that did not belong to your roommate. Have you ever seen a circle of people standing outside of the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? People that were exceptionally tall? And one of the most unsettling ones, have you ever seen somebody standing at the foot of your bed upon waking up between the hours of midnight to 3 a.m., only for them to disappear moments later? So, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinct features? As they continued probing me, my mind began conjuring up some of the strange shit that had happened after my roommate had moved in, shit that I had written off as figments of my imagination, simply because I had no other explanation for them. I did hear the voices, always coming from the room next to mine where my roommate slept. I was always so tired when I heard them, but I do remember it either sounding like a young woman or a man with an extremely deep voice. I could never make out any words. It always sounded like gibberish. And then there was that one time where I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I didn't bother turning the lights on as I entered. But as my eyes began adjusting to the dark, I could have sworn that somebody was already sitting on the toilet. Somebody extremely tall. Of course, when I turned on the lights, nothing was there. It was easy to chalk it up as a product of late-night drowsiness at the time, and I had never really thought about it since. After doing my best to give them useful information, the suits spent a good few minutes taking notes on their phones. Once they were done, they sat up quickly, told me that they'd be in touch before leaving the room. A cop came in a few minutes later and told me that since I couldn't return to the apartment, they would set me up in a nearby hotel until they were able to get the situation under control, and that I should stay put until they gave me a call. What happened? I asked him. What did you guys find up there? He stared at me for a long time, not as if he were deep in thought but as if he held deep aversion for what he was considering telling me. Eventually he just shook his head. I don't know, he said. I mean, I really don't know. I nodded, tried to smile, though I'm sure it didn't come across very well. It's the next day now and I'm in the hotel. Of course I couldn't sleep. Couldn't really eat. The officer hasn't called me yet. When I try searching up information about the evacuation on the internet, all I can find are articles claiming that it was due to a fire. A fucking fire. Update, I fell asleep and I just woke up. It's 1 a.m. now, and I can hear the shower. I thought my boyfriend was the love of my life until I discovered he was drugging me at night. Lately I've been waking up still exhausted. Even if I went to bed early, I'd wake up feeling like I haven't slept in days. Trying to get out of bed for work was almost impossible, which was strange for me because I was always a high-energy sort of person. A few hours of sleep and I was always good to go. I was at a loss as to what was happening. After a barrage of tests, even my doctor couldn't find anything wrong with me. The only recent change in my life was my boyfriend who had moved in and I was sharing a bed for the first time in my life. Stephen was the first love of my life and this was my first serious relationship. I didn't want to spoil things by making him sleep in the spare room. I liked having Stephen around. He made a real fuss over me and he would bring me chamomile tea every night before bed. The pain in my hip was sharp and pulsated up the right side of my body. Jumped from my bed and nearly collapsed to the floor as I struggled to get to the bathroom. "Stephen, can you get in here?" I cried. A big dark bruise covered my hip, as if I was assaulted in my sleep with a metal bar. "What's wrong?" Stephen said as he came rushing into the bathroom. "Did I fall out of bed or something?" Stephen had a weird expression on his face. I could swear he looked guilty about something. Probably, I don't know. His response was dismissive, which sent my brain spiraling with all sorts of thoughts. "This is not normal, Stephen. I think there's something wrong with me." "You should probably see a doctor then," he coldly said before quickly leaving the bathroom. My doctor was still at a loss and suggested I should see someone who could rule out anything nefarious. Stephen was still dismissive of me as we drove to the hospital. "I'm sure it's nothing. You're probably just stressed from work. People don't wake up with bruises over stress," I angrily thought to myself. The doctor at the hospital took my blood and did all sorts of tests on me, including a stress test. Should have been happy when the test came back clear, but it only made me feel like I was losing my mind. Something was definitely wrong with me. "I would prescribe you sedatives, but your blood work shows you are already on nitrazepam," explained the doctor. I was dumbstruck and wasn't sure what the doctor was talking about. I have never taken so much as a painkiller in my life. The doctor's face looked how I felt. He took out his charts and looked over them again. "No, you definitely tested positive for nitrazepam, which is a powerful sedative." Later that evening as I sat in bed, a million different thoughts ran through my head. How was that even possible? I thought to myself. As I sat there, Stephen walked in with my chamomile tea, and just as I was about to put it to my lips, I was struck by the most unnerving thought. The realization that my boyfriend was drugging me hit me like a ton of bricks and filled me with a dread I had never felt before. I emptied the contents of the cup down the sink in the bathroom before jumping back into bed. "Was it hot enough for you?" asked Stephen as he jumped into bed beside me. "Perfect as always." I felt as if I was lying beside a complete stranger. Had I ever really known him? I thought to myself as I lay there terrified. He was doing unimaginable things to me while I slept. I must have drifted off at some stage because when I woke up the room was a mess and Stephen was nowhere to be seen. My body ached all over and it felt like I was in a fight. What the hell was he doing to me in my sleep? I thought. I had made the decision to go to the police, but I needed evidence, or it was just my word against his. I had purchased a hidden camera and set it up in the bedroom, pointing it towards the bed. I woke up exhausted as usual, which unfortunately meant you had done something to me while I slept, but I had it on camera. I opened my laptop to check the footage. For the first couple of hours of sleep, nothing happened. For a moment I had hoped I was imagining everything until I watched myself jolt from the bed. At first, I couldn't believe what I was doing. It felt like I was watching a horror movie as I watched myself crawl up the bedroom wall like some possessed demon. I continued to crawl up the wall onto the ceiling, looking down over Stephen like I was ready to pounce on him. Stephen woke and it was strange watching him because it was like he was prepared for what was happening and didn't seem fazed by it. He took a stick out from under the bed as I pounced from the ceiling above and he spent the next hour fighting me off. I watched as he subdued me on the bed before pulling out handcuffs and cuffing me to the bed. I looked at the marks on my wrists, which made sense now. As soon as Stephen came home from work, I ran and threw my arms around him. "Why didn't you tell me what you were going through every night?" Stephen shrugged his shoulders. "I thought you knew, and usually the drugs I was giving you made things a little easier. Why are you even still with me?" "My last girlfriend was a jealous psychopath. You're a walk in the park compared to her." "Am I the asshole for my girlfriend not getting into the school she wanted?" "My girlfriend is a non-traditional college student. She completed her associates last spring with a very high GPA and meant to apply to some prestigious schools. Whenever she started working on her applications, though, she would panic and shut down. She ended up missing all of her deadlines. She did complete her application for one Ivy League school, but didn't submit it at the last moment, saying it was embarrassing and that she had no place there. I didn't know what to do in these moments, to be honest, but I am sure what I did wasn't right. She would really shut down and pull into herself, going into a 1,000-yard stare or breaking down in tears. I tried consoling her, but I can't remember a time it worked. I read over her application essays and made suggestions, but she would get defensive and reject them. I'm a pretty bad writer and she's a very good one, so that was likely the right call. Now she's at a local public university and in tears every day because she finds it isn't the right fit. She blames me and tells me I didn't help enough, that she never felt supported through the process. I asked how I could have helped and she called me an asshole, saying she didn't know how to explain how to help people. She says she doesn't know if she can forgive me for this. I am willing to accept I'm the asshole and I'm what's holding her back, but I legitimately don't know what I should have done. How does one help an adult shutting down? What was I supposed to do in this situation? I honestly feel terrible, and having no idea what my proper role should have been just makes it worse. Am I the asshole for sharing my opinion with my brother and warning him about his wife unprompted? My brother, 36M, and his wife Emma, 35F, have known each other for the best part of 2 decades. They were in the same friend group toward the end of high school and lost touch after graduation for a while, but ended up reconnecting when the larger friend group reconnected. Then Emma moved away and they lost touch again. In that time my brother got married and had his kids, 11M and 9F. Emma moved back about 5 years ago and started spending more time with the old friend group, my brother included, though they didn't seem to get closer until after the death of one of their shared friends. My brother's marriage to the mother of his children was never super great. It only got worse when the kids were no longer babies, however, and they separated 4 years ago. Their divorce was finalized a little over 2 years later. Before the divorce was finalized, my brother and Emma started dating. They broke up briefly and got back together, but Emma's attitude toward the kids' mom was incredibly negative around the time of the breakup and remained the same after they got back together. Emma and my brother got engaged fast, and then my brother's ex, the kids' mom, died. The kids weren't happy about living with Emma, and less so about Emma trying to step into a motherly role for them. They know how she felt about their mom, and with her gone the loyalty pull was stronger and the dislike for Emma more intense. My brother and Emma's wedding day was a shit show and the kids protested. The whole way through, which my brother was aware of, but he said they'd been okay with Emma before, as in before he dated her, so they were just protesting him being with anyone who wasn't their mom. Emma is jealous of the kids' mom. She's jealous the kids still love her. She still hates their mom for reasons I don't know. The kids know she hates their mom and they use it to taunt her. They tell her almost every day, if Emma is to be believed, that she'll never be as good as their mom and they will never love her or accept her because she isn't good enough. They compare Emma's cooking to their mom's, they compare the way she decorates, stuff like that. I know they do it. But I also know Emma has kicked up a fuss about the kids keeping their mom's things and having them in their bedrooms, as well as having photographs of her. Which, if you ask me anything, is likely the reason the kids are so quick to compare the way they do. The household is toxic. Emma's jealousy of their mom grows and the kids' dislike for Emma grows. My brother acts like things are fine and he's burying his head about the growing issues. I decided not to ignore it and address this with my brother. I told him Emma and the kids are not getting along and her jealousy is going to make his home even more of a living hell than it already is. And I told him I did not think Emma could come back from her jealousy and warned him that she could cost him the kids. He told me he didn't ask for my opinion and to mind my own business. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for calling my mom unreliable? I'm 16 years old and I needed a foam mat for a science project. The only problem is these are not near our house and at a store 30 minutes away. I don't got a license, so I told my mom before I went to school to buy it for me. Just to make sure she did, I even sent her messages during school to get it, which she agreed to. When I got home Tuesday, I discovered that she completely forgot about it and said that she was too tired to drive to the store right now. I was slightly nervous because the project is due Friday, but it wasn't too big of a deal because I was sure I could do it in that time. So, I told her to buy it tomorrow, Wednesday, and sent her a message during school again to buy it. When I got home, she was chatting with friends she invited over. So I reminded her if she got it and her reply was no, so I asked if we could go right now, but she said no because her friends are here. At this point, I was irritated but didn't push it and just made her promise she'd get it tomorrow. Eventually, her friends did leave around 7, but I was already deep into my homework by then and didn't get to bed until 11. So today rolls around and I told her she must absolutely get it now as the project is due tomorrow. She confirms and says she got it, but when I got home she didn't have the dang thing. I was irritated at this point and just remarked that even with all my reminders that she still proves to be unreliable. She got mad and started screaming at me, calling me ungrateful and critical of her mistakes. So now I'm in the car with my friend going to that store because my mom refused to take me after I said that to her. So am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for not smiling at my mom after she left with my siblings? To start things off, I don't really know what's going on with my parents. Ever since I was a kid, my mom would always suddenly try to leave our house and shit, but this time is the first time she succeeded. So a few days ago, I was watching a movie, and my mom started packing up things and I asked her where she was going. She told me to come with her for 2 days and that it's going to be a vacation, but when I asked her where, she didn't tell me. I've known her for so long that I knew she was leaving because of problems involving my dad. I said no though. Both my siblings were going and I didn't want to leave my dad because I didn't want him to be lonely. I also didn't want to be seen as if I picked sides, so I just tried to keep away from it. My dad came home and found out everyone was gone. I thought he would have lashed out, but he just looked sad with the groceries he bought for my siblings. He left some time after to look for them. He called me a few times asking me if I knew where my mom was and telling me to text her to ask where she was. He sounded so disappointed when he asked me why I didn't know where she was. It stung lol. My dad came home. I heard him calling with my mom. Judging from what I heard, my dad was able to talk to her while he was searching for them and that they'd come home the next day. They did come home and she was smiling and told me I should have come. I don't remember what I said, but it was along the lines of I have stuff to do, which was actually true. After that, my mom kept trying to get close with me, constantly kissing me. It was the type of kisses that were disgusting and felt like they left saliva. I've always told her that I was uncomfortable with it, but she never listens. I avoided her a few times after that, by leaving after 5 to 7 minutes that she was there because she kept trying to do that. It was never this bad before. She keeps asking me if I have a problem with her in an angry voice that I really dislike. I'm not sure what to do. I haven't been smiling at her these past couple days since I kept staying in my room reading. She would knock on my door asking to see me. I always answered but would never prolong it. She asked me if I wanted to make pizza a while ago. I didn't really answer and just followed her since I was feeling so tired. She asked me if I had a problem with her again while I was eating. I said no and that I was just tired. I bumped into my dad. He actually noticed that I looked tired lol. Or maybe it was because I accidentally slept on the table LMAO. I honestly don't know what to do with my mom. I don't really want to talk to her because she's tried to kiss me again and it's so gross, but she just keeps pushing my boundaries, but at the same time I don't really like frequently getting asked, do you have a problem with me? Since it's honestly very uncomfortable. I kinda need advice, but I want to know if it's mean or assholish to not smile at your parents since I'm practicing being a better person. Am I the asshole for telling my ML to fuck off? So my husband Cashin, 30M, and I, 28F, and I have been married for 3 years and am currently 30 weeks pregnant, will become relevant later. Cashin has never had a good relationship with his mom because she was very invasive when he was a kid and did a bunch of really crazy stuff to him. Constantly accused him of doing drugs / having unprotected sex, drinking and so much more. For example of severity, one time after she wrongly accused him of stealing her vodka, she pressed the lid of another bottle against his mouth and said something to the effect of, if you want it so much, then drink the whole bottle. Right now. Drink it. And tried to make him drink it. He left the house. She found the bottle later because she'd put it somewhere safe. To clarify, all of these things were just wild accusations, and it's safe to say that he didn't have a good relationship with her in his childhood or adulthood. He has an okay relationship with his dad, a lot better than his mom, and they talk at least once a month, but it's very rare that he has contact with her now. I've met her once or twice. His family tend to have these really big birthday parties. He has 5 brothers and an incredible amount of aunts / uncles / cousins, and there was one this weekend that we both went to for one of his uncles that he was close to growing up and still speaks to now. He knew that his parents were going to be there, but figured with everyone else that was also going to be there that we could just avoid his mom or whatever worked. All was okay when we got there. We milled around for a bit and Cashin ended up going off to speak to one of his brothers, and I was making my way over to go to see one of his aunts when I was stopped by his mom. I thought she wasn't going to do anything at the party, so we had a conversation and she asked me about how everything is, and then asked if she could touch the baby bump. I kind of laughed it off and said that I'd rather she didn't, because I'm not a big fan of people I don't know touching me. She started getting pushy then, saying stuff like, I'm going to be this baby's grandmother, and I have a right to know them and watch them grow up. She continued and said, I know that Cashin hates me, but that's because he was always such a sensitive child. To me, this was the point when I was just done with her shit, and so I told her to fuck off. It just proves to me that she's not changed because she still doesn't admit to doing any wrong and treats mine and Cass' kid with the same entitlement that she treats him with. I said she had no right to see the baby and that if she hadn't gotten the clue by now, then she probably never will. I know I could have been nicer about it, but I was just done. Cass and I left and he's not really bothered by it at all, but I know I could have dealt with it with more tact. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for telling my FIL that he's a shit father? So I, 27F, knew my husband Rowan, 29M, for a while before we even dated. We grew up in the same town and we were good friends through school, so I met a lot of his family etc. when I was a kid. We lost contact for uni but then kind of talked again after and have evidently dated and got married. When I was a kid I always kind of thought that Rowan's dad was weird. I obviously didn't have much context for it then, but I always thought it. His mum passed away when Rowan was young and he has one older brother, 40M, but obviously the age gap meant that they weren't very close for much of his childhood. I know that when Rowan was a teen he acted out, drank a lot with his friends, got into fights, didn't have good grades. I don't doubt that he was a difficult kid to raise, but I always thought that he was a good person and still do. When we started dating he told me about the reasons behind him acting out, that his father was always drinking or out, that he constantly told Rowan that he wasn't good enough, that he was a shit son etc., accused him of sneaking out / unprotected sex / drugs, constantly tore apart his room looking for incriminating things. Rowan's changed a lot now and is a genuinely down-to-earth guy that would help anyone that asked. Him and his father don't really speak anymore. This was mainly due to a huge argument they had when Rowan was about 18 and his dad said that his mum would be really disappointed in him if she was still alive, that he was never going to amount to anything. Rowan told me after that he packed his bags, stayed with a friend for a while and hasn't particularly spoken to his dad ever again. Rowan and I went back to the hometown this weekend to see my parents, and me and my mum went out to a bar for a catch-up. I immediately recognized his dad because he has a bunch of tattoos of random things on his neck and whatnot that I remember looking at as a kid, and he was standing next to me at the bar. We made eye contact and he looked surprised and said something to the effect of, "I heard you and Rowan got married." I'm surprised, he's always been a skirt chaser. Thank God he doesn't speak to me anymore. I repeated the sentiment that I was glad they didn't speak anymore, but added that it was because he'd been a shit father. He got very defensive, saying that Rowan had been difficult to raise and whatnot, and I just turned around and left to go and sit back down with my mum. I kind of pity him, but I wish I'd just not even spoken to him and left it. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for expecting my sister to pay back on the due date the money I lent her for her dog's vet bills? On October 1st, I, 35M, lent my sister, 27F, $2,500 for her dog's vet bills. She promised to pay me back on November 1st. She said she would have the money on that date. I have this in writing via text. I've never lent my sister money before and I generally trust her. I didn't care for her dog, but she loved it. It ended up passing on October 15th. She was devastated. I gave her my condolences and went about my life. On November 1st, I asked her to Venmo me the $2,500. She blows up on me asking how I could ask her for money when she is still grieving. She says it's only been 2 weeks since the dog died and she isn't ready to move on. I told her I'm not telling you to move on, I'm telling you to pay me what I'm owed. I asked if she is saying she is not paying me back. She called me an asshole and hung up. I texted her a screenshot of her agreeing to the November 1st date. She ignored me. I can live without getting the $2,500 back with no material effect on my life, but also $2,500 is not an insignificant amount. In talking with our mom, the vet bill was over $7,000 and it didn't save her dog's life. I found out my mom gifted her $2,000 to help out. I have no idea what my sister's finances are like, but I'm guessing they are not good. She is now 7 days late and I haven't seen a dime. We've had several arguments and this has really deteriorated our relationship. Essentially she is calling me an unsympathetic asshole. But am I? Am I the asshole for asking my mom to text before coming into my home? I, 26F, live with my partner, 25M, about 3 hours away from my parents. Today my parents were coming to visit to celebrate my birthday. They said they would get to the house between 3 and 4, so my partner and I planned a lunch with his parents for earlier in the afternoon. At about 2 p.m. I get a Life 360 notice. I check the app and my parents have been at my house for about half an hour. Some context. I tend to feel a bit more sensitive around needing to feel that my home is my space. When we moved in, my mum wanted a key, but I wanted the decision of spare keys to be made between me and my partner and asked her to wait and let us talk. She went out that afternoon and made herself a key along with several others which she gave to different family members she felt should have keys. So I am already a bit more sensitive to feeling a need to have control around my home. Anyway, today I called my mom and tried to keep things light by laughing and saying, "Oh mom, you're supposed to text me before you just go in, silly?" but I could tell this upset her and she said she didn't know that was a rule. I was smiling and trying to stay light and I just said, "That's okay, just in future can you text me when you get there and are going in if we're not home?" I tried to make some other small talk but she was upset and so we hung up. I received a text shortly after saying along the lines of, "I do not feel welcome at your house and so I'm leaving. I would never ask you to text me before coming into my home. We will be leaving the cupcakes and gift. We are going to see your brother and then we'll be going home. I feel sick and anxious." I'm not sure if this is an unreasonable boundary to set, though I tried to be as kind and light-hearted as possible with it. I love my mom and all she does for me. At the same time, this is also my partner's home. To me, I feel respected and recognized as an individual when my parents just let me know they have arrived and are going in when I'm not home. I will be talking this through with my psychologist, but in the meantime, am I the asshole? Edit, I appreciate all of the feedback and concerns. I do know who has access to these keys and am not worried about any safety issues. They are people my partner and I would have considered sharing keys with ourselves, but would have wanted to make that decision independently. At this point, we are moving in a few months, so it's not worth changing the locks. I do see the move as an opportunity to reinforce that I am not comfortable with anyone making keys but us and that we will decide who receives these keys. Am I the asshole for leaving my mum home after she added herself to a trip I organized? I choose to organize a solo trip drive from my town to our family's sea house. Usually it's a 4H drive, but I decided I wanted to take many detours to test my recently bought car, making the drive around 8H long. The day before leaving, my mom, who is also in love with our sea house, heard about my plans and decided she wanted to come too. The problem is, she is the passenger driver type of person, and going 1 km/h over the limit, it's a death penalty for her. I love being alone and I like going to our second house because in this period the town is empty and quiet. My mum also liked the peace of this place, but she hates doing something that she doesn't like, and my drive would be restricted to going from A to B and I wouldn't have the same degree of freedom that one gets when being home alone. So I tried to tell her I'd rather go by myself, and after a short talk I left. She didn't look upset, but my sister said she called me asshole a few times after I left. Am I the asshole? Edit how the conversation went and extra info. My father bought a new car for himself because his V6 Busso Alfa Romeo broke down, so he gave me his old broken car and told me I could keep it if I could fix it. Took a few months, but once I was done working on the car I started planning the trip. I came back home the day before leaving. I live in a different city because I study there. My mum told me she wanted to come by car too. When I was planning the trip she told me she might reach me by train. I told her that I planned to make a few detours on twisty roads and many stops. She told me that she only wanted to do the highway. I told her I planned my trip long ago and I would have rather stick to my plans, so I proposed to pay for her train ticket, but she told me she didn't want to take the train because she needed to switch it 2 times. She traveled all her life and has a lot of experience with trains and any sorts of means of travel. That's when I said I wasn't going to change my plans because I had been looking forward to that day for so long. You could tell she was hurt and that's why I felt guilty, even though I did all I could to get her to the beach house without completely changing my plans. I have been studying since September for a really hard exam I took on the 4th of November, and this was the only week of vacation I could take before diving back and studying for a December exam. That's why I was so determined in doing what I wanted before getting back on the books. Am I the asshole for telling my mom to stop playing the victim and ruining Thanksgiving? My mom and I have always had a strained relationship. Growing up, I learned early that everything had to be about her, her needs, her feelings. I was expected to manage my emotions around her, tiptoeing through every interaction to keep the peace. If something didn't go her way, she'd somehow twist the situation until she was the one hurt, the one who'd done everything right, and was never appreciated. I hated the way it made me feel, but I told myself that one day I'd have a chance to set boundaries, to live my life without walking on eggshells. But as an adult, nothing's really changed. I still find myself anxiously checking my tone, weighing every word before I speak, just to keep her from making herself the victim. This year, I decided to host Thanksgiving for the family, and I promised myself it'd be a peaceful day. My mom could come, but I'd just focus on keeping things calm. No drama. Things were fine at first. My dad was cracking jokes, everyone was catching up, and I started to think maybe this time would be different. Then as we sat down to eat, my mom started in. First, it was the small jabs and comments about how I never call, how I'm always too busy for her. I tried to brush them off, but then she moved on to bigger things, saying how family means so much to her, but she feels like she's the only one who cares. That's when she launched into her usual spiel about how much she's sacrificed, how no one appreciates her, and how she's such a good mother who's never shown gratitude. I could feel my blood start to boil. I tried to hold my tongue, but I couldn't do it. I snapped and said, "Mom, you really need to stop playing the victim. It's exhausting and it's why we don't get along." The room went dead silent. She sat there, shocked, before her face crumpled and she started crying. She called me cruel, heartless, and said I'd ruined Thanksgiving. She said she'd only ever tried to love me, but I was too selfish to see it. She stormed out and my dad followed her, giving me a sad look, like he knew this was coming but couldn't do anything about it. Now the family is completely divided. Some of my relatives have called me to say they understand, that she needed to hear it, but others think I was heartless, that I could have been kinder or more tactful. They keep saying she's my mother and that one day I'll regret speaking to her this way. But a part of me feels like I had to say it. If I didn't draw a line now, I'd be stuck in this cycle forever. I'm conflicted because I never wanted to hurt her, especially not on Thanksgiving. I just couldn't keep pretending her behavior was okay. She refuses to see her role in our issues, and I'm tired of always being the one who has to accommodate her feelings. So, am I the asshole for finally telling her the truth, even if it hurt her? Am I the asshole proving my friend wrong that looks do matter? I, 34M, have a great group of friends who are all really supportive and uplifting, especially with me recently as I try and lose all the weight I've put on since COVID. I've been working on it with diet, exercise, and medication, but it takes time and they've all been amazing. Out of the group, I'm the only one still single, and it's not by choice, with mental, financial, and physical health issues have keeping me single. One of my friends, K, 28F, is very well-meaning but has decided to become my personal cheerleader when it comes to my dating life. She keeps insisting I try dating apps, saying it will just take some time, I need to be patient, and that my personality will shine through. I've told her I've tried them but haven't had much luck and that it's my looks that are holding me back, which I'm actively working on. Kay insists I'm being too negative about myself. The rest of the group just roll their eyes. So, to prove my point, and this is where I might be the asshole, I recreated my dating profiles, same name, background, prompts, but using my friends, who is a good-looking happily married dude, pictures with his permission, to prove my point that looks matter more on dating apps. I showed Kay the results. Over 150 matches on Hinge and a ton of likes and roses on Hinge and a plethora of bots on Tinder. She's now upset, calling me an asshole for showing her how shitty the world can be, saying she was just trying to help. I feel like I might be the asshole for raining on her parade and showing how shitty the single life can be for an overweight single. I also might be a bit of an asshole to those women who have messaged me thinking I'm my good-looking gay friend. So Reddit, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for renovations that my parents want because I live at home with them but don't pay rent? For some backstory, I used to work in a different line of work and was living by myself in another city until 2020 when I moved back in with my parents due to my dad going through some medical issues and my mom having to become a caregiver for him for a period of time. I had just switched jobs during COVID and now work 2 fully remote jobs from home with extremely flexible working hours, which has allowed me to essentially become a pseudo-parent for my younger brother who is 12 years my junior. I, 29M, currently live with my parents, late 50s, and my younger brother, 17M. I do not pay rent, however, I take care of 100% of the monthly bills/groceries for the house, owned by parents, after moving back in, and have been paying for any maintenance costs for anything that has broken down in the last 7 years. I have also paid for new appliances to replace broken ones that include a new refrigerator, a new washing machine, and 3 new AC units. I am also currently taking care of 100% of my brother's college tuition and will be for the next 2 years, paid for his driving lessons, paid for an old car for him, paying for his rent and food, college is in a different part of the country, and paying for his air tickets to come back and visit once every 3 months. At request of parents, I paid for my own way through college as my parents did not support my choice of studies, including working myself to death to pay for food and lodging during that. I have basically been supporting myself since I was 16. I basically had no social life during that because I had to work 3 different jobs to make ends meet. My parents want to do a major remodel to the house that will cost a not insignificant amount of money. Yes, I am making enough money to pay for all this, but this is where I am putting my foot down and I refused. My parents insisted that since I am living at home and have not paid a single cent of rent for the last 4 years, that this is a very reasonable request. The drama has now spread to my extended family, and my aunts and uncles are now texting me and saying that I am an ungrateful child since I am refusing this and are trying to pressure me into paying for the renos. I think that I have paid for more than enough in the last 10 years considering all the financial responsibilities that I have taken on. So, internet, am I the asshole for not wanting to pay? Am I the asshole for not letting my in-laws discipline our child? My husband Ronan, 32M, and I, 29F, have one daughter, 3. We've always had very clear and well-established parenting that works well for us and for her. Enter my in-laws. Prior to having our daughter, we've began to see them more frequently, tends to be around 10 times a month, whereas before then it would be maybe once/twice, because Ronan has a reasonably strained relationship with them, particularly his mom. For context, this is because she was one of those people who couldn't let him have his own privacy, constantly looking through his room, asking where/when/with who he was going even into late teens, things like that. He never completely cut contact, but they've been better since we had our daughter, and he didn't want to completely cut them out of being grandparents. They've always had a different approach to discipline than we do, another reason why Ronan has a strained relationship, and it's very shouty/punishment based. Raised voices, very tough love, while we tend to prefer calm discussions, occasional timeouts, and natural consequences. Our daughter's a pretty good kid though, she doesn't tend to act out a lot and usually is more than happy just doing her own thing. Yesterday we went to go and see his parents, and she had a tantrum over her granddad taking her favorite toy from her because she's too old for it now. Before I could step in, Ronan's mom had raised her voice and said, "Behave or else." I tried to remain calm with the situation and told them that we won't discipline her that way, and asked that they leave any disciplinary actions to Ronan and I to deal with. They were offended and said that we were coddling her, and that their methods are tried and true. They also accused us of being too soft and that we don't know what we're doing. Ronan stepped in and said that it was our daughter, and we'd raise her how we believe best. We left shortly after this, and his in-laws think that I was overreacting and that I'm the problem. I just want what's best for our daughter. So, am I the asshole for not letting them discipline our daughter? Should I have handled this differently? Thanks for reading and any suggestions. Am I the asshole to ban my son's girlfriend from my house? My 52F, son, 22M, has started bringing his girlfriend over a little over a month ago. The first time he brought her over I took it quite formally and cooked up a feast, but it soon became obvious it's becoming a daily thing and not just a one-time formal thing. The first meeting she came quite a bit late and the food was cold by the time she came. No pardons or anything, and when we were done everyone helped to pack up. And we thought she would kinda get the notion, but since it was her first time here we didn't say anything. As for desserts, I like to do this thing. Example, for cupcake I will prepare the icing and everyone would gather and decorate their dessert, but she made it quite clear from the get-go she wasn't interested in it and stuff. So for basically the last month she's almost here daily and she would request for specific dishes with no thanks and stuff. My other son, 17M, has also verbally called him out on her not contributing anything gently, but she said something around the lines of no ring, no wife duties. I don't see this as a wife duty. I would do this for my friends' hangout and everyone in my house put a hand in. My daughters, my husband and my sons. So today when my son told me that she requested a specific meat pie for dinner, I am quite done. However, I don't want to affect my relationship with my son over this. Especially since he really likes her a lot, but I'm really considering banning her from our dinners. Am I the asshole for taking $6,000 from the sale of a house that my girlfriend and I both owned? Am I the asshole for taking $6,000 from the sale of a house that my girlfriend and I both owned? Me, male 38, and my girlfriend, female 37, bought a home together to live in with our kids. I have one daughter and she has 2 boys. She sold her previous house and put all of that money into buying this house with me. She couldn't get a mortgage but made great money and basically put all of the dollar down for the down payment and moving expenses. We both paid the mortgage and started a joint account for the house. I started the account and put $5,000 in it, and we each added the same amount each week to cover the bills and anything for the house. Living together was a mistake, and she sent a text one day while I was at work that she talked to a realtor and she was putting the house on the market after 8 months of living there. The house sold quickly for about what we paid, but not before the first buyer backed out. After the first buyer backed out, she left me to pay the mortgage and utilities for the empty house. After a year and a half, we were awarded the first buyer's down payment of $32,000. I haven't taken any money from the sale of the house at this point, and I think $6,000 would be fair. My ex thinks I should only get what I paid for the lawyer to fight for the down payment, which was $2,750. I feel $6,000 is fair. Like I said, she put a lot of money down, and even though the house sold for a similar amount, she still lost a substantial sum of money. Am I the asshole? To be clear, we bought the house for $630,000, we sold it for $620,000. My girlfriend took all the funds from that transaction. Prior to selling it for $620,000, we accepted an offer of $640,000. This buyer walked away and her down payment was in escrow for about a year and a half. We had to go to court and they awarded us $32,000, which was her down payment. The lawyer cost $5,500 and we split that $2,750 each. So, this $32,000 I would be taking $6,000. Again, I didn't take any funds from the $620,000 sale. She has everything from that and $26,000 from the award. Am I the asshole for telling my sister to stop being weird about our little sister's eagerness with her boyfriend? I don't use Reddit, so my husband made this account for me to post. I, 31F, have two sisters, Claire, 27F, and Anne, 20F. Growing up, I had to take on a motherly role for, and since we don't have a dad and our mother was absent, which in turn made every ex-boyfriend and my now husband also have a type of fatherly role for her, taking her to a father-daughter dance, teaching her how to ride a bike, she wants my husband to walk her down the aisle, etc. Claire is for the first time dating a guy, Roger, for long enough that we got to meet him, and was extremely excited to get a new person in the family, and the first dinner was okay, she was her usual chatty self and she was all over him. My husband even joked he was being replaced. Claire was a bit moody and snarky, but that's just how she is, so I didn't think much about it. The problem started with dinner at my house, and cooked the whole food. She was nervous because she felt he didn't like her much, so she was trying extra hard. She kept telling him that she cooked this and that, she just wanted a compliment on it, and Claire rolled her eyes and snapped with something like, "He gets it, you're very wife material." Later the five of us are drinking wine on the porch and dancing. At some point a certain song started and Anne gasped and cheered up, saying how she tried to teach my husband this dance but he couldn't do it, TikTok dance for what I understood, and asked Roger if he could try it with her. She kinda gets to do it for like 10 seconds before Claire starts yelling and tells Anne to stop being such a whore. She goes on about how Anne's dressed and how she's acting desperate and thinking it's cute to act like that to other people's men. I told her no one is trying to steal her man and she's acting completely insane. But left and we got to talk through the phone the next day. She was ignoring Anne's calls, and she rants about the same things and I'm again annoyed that she's acting it was malicious on Anne's part. If she had just been annoyed that Anne was being too much, I'd have understood. Like, yeah, Anne is like an overly hyper puppy, so I get it. It'd have been okay for Claire to tell her to back off because not everyone wants to be her friend. But it was the fact that she made it seem like it was something malicious on Anne's part. It felt very disingenuous, especially since Anne is so naive and also has never shown any interest in dating ever. She just got so excited to have someone new, especially older and male, in her life, and it felt wrong that Claire made her feel so self-conscious about it. But also, I get it, it's a girl being eager with your boyfriend and then trying to do TikTok dances with him. I could understand how people might think this is totally weird and inappropriate, but I think someone that's naive enough to downright say, "I'm gonna cook for him because I want him to like me," is not someone that's trying to sneakily steal someone's man. Am I the asshole? Edit. Was asked for info in a handful of comments and I can't believe I didn't mention it. Is in special needs / delayed / diagnosed with something? She was in special needs class growing up and her boss tried to get her tested because he thought they could get a tax reduction with her, but it didn't end up happening. No diagnosis. I'd say it's ADHD and a bit of a low IQ, but I'm not qualified to judge that. Edit. Thank you for the harsh judgment, guys. I've apologized to Claire, which led to a very emotional conversation about our upbringing, which made me apologize for giving in more attention, and had already been apologizing since that night, and now Claire finally responded and apologized too, saying she knew and wasn't flirting with him, she just felt insecure and jealous. The whole conversation with the three of us was very long and emotional, and it was so much more than the dinner, so thank you guys for giving me a reality check. Anne's gonna start therapy. Am I the asshole for not asking my GF if it's okay for guests stop by my house? I, 30M, live with my girlfriend, 28F, in a house I bought this past year. An issue that keeps coming up is that my GF keeps saying I'm letting others invade her privacy by having guests like family members, friends, etc., stop by my house for a brief moment even though I let her know in advance. They're usually there to just pick up a tool I borrowed, give me an item really quick, stuff like that. Sometimes a friend will call and say, "Hey, I'm in your area, do you mind if I come pick up my bike I left at your house?" To which I'll say, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Then I'll let my girlfriend know that my friend is 15 minutes away. She'll get mad because I'm not asking her if it's okay before I agree. I understand planning an event, having guests over for a longer period of time, a get-together, but someone just coming over for a second? I don't feel like I need to ask her permission if it's okay for these types of things as long as I'm letting her know who and when they'll be coming by. That's a strange conversation to have if I have to let the other person know that I need to check with my girlfriend to see if it's okay before they drop by. No one I know has ever said, hey, let me check with my partner before you come over to see if it's okay for something so small. Am I the asshole? TLDR, I 30M, live with my GF 28F, in my house. For guests that come to my house for a brief moment, I usually don't ask her if it's okay for them to come by, but I will give her a heads up to let her know so and so will be coming by at X time. She says I should be asking her. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for telling my mom I won't be giving my son her last name? Hi Reddit, I'm a 21F who's expecting my first child with my partner of almost 8 years, 20 meters. Our son is due in less than 2 months. For this story to make sense, it requires some backstory. My father isn't in the picture. So my immediate family is me, my mother, and my twin. About 3 years ago my maternal grandmother died. I didn't have a relationship with her and neither did my mum due to them always fighting. My grandma was quite wealthy and when she passed away she left me and my twin $500,000 total in a trust that we couldn't access until we were 25. She left my mother nothing. My mother got a lawyer and got money released early from that trust with the condition that me and my twin gave her half of our inheritance each. If we hadn't agreed to give her anything, she would have gotten nothing. Our mum then convinced us to put all the money into a trust of her own for our family exclusively for education and housing, saying it would build stability for future generations. I used this money to get a house that me and my partner currently live in. Since my mum found out I was pregnant, she's been very pushy that we use her last name, which is currently my last name. It's a traditional Scottish name with a capital letter in the middle and a lot of use of the letters M and N. I don't like this last name, it's hard to pronounce from just reading. I also fully intend to take my partner's last name in the future. 3 months ago I told her we wouldn't be using her last name and would be using just my partner's last name. This set her off, calling me petty and ungrateful. I apologized for upsetting her and asked if we could have a conversation about it so I could understand why it upset her. I expressed that I love her and I don't want her to be upset. She refused, saying it was my child and I could do what I wanted. I assumed she had come to terms with it and moved on. Fast forward to last week. I got a text from my mum saying the following: by the way, I've made changes to the trust. Her last name needs to be your child's surname if you want him to benefit from the trust. I haven't worked this hard for the future to support a partner's last name. That's just the way it is. My last name or bust. I'd rather take the lot and spend it. This upset me. I asked her to give me some time and space to think about what she's done. She then went off at me about how her hard work wouldn't be wasted, even though she herself said it would be set up for future generations like my kids. She wouldn't even have any money to blackmail me with if I hadn't agreed to give her half of my inheritance after her own mother screwed her over. I have gone no contact. But I'm starting to wonder if I'm the asshole for not just using her name to keep her happy in order to make sure my son gets access to that money. I don't want him to miss out just because his grandmother is an entitled piece of work. So Reddit, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for expecting to be included in boyfriend's daughter's birthday trip? My BF and I have been together for 2 years. We live together. We both have kids that I have mine 24/7. He has his daughter every other weekend. Sometimes his daughter stays with me for all her school break while dad works. When we got together we agreed that we would treat each other's kids as our own. I try to be involved as much as can but try not to overstep as he co-parents with his ex. I haven't met his ex yet. I haven't asked to meet her and neither has she. At this point in our relationship I assume that I'm his family. Yet he keeps me separate from his daughter when it comes to sports, birthday parties, etc. He never invites me, only says, I have this going on for my daughter, and is on his way. I've always respected it, never questioned it, and remained in the background. 3 months ago he mentioned he would work OT or a second job to save up for Disney for his daughter's birthday. He never invited, he only mentioned it. I assumed eventually he'd tell me more and invite me, but he didn't and I never brought it up. A few weeks later we had a barbecue with friends at our house. One of our friends overheard he had a Disney trip planned for his daughter's birthday without me. She told him he should take me and give me my place as his future wife and his family. I joked and said, he didn't invite me because his ex doesn't want me there, and he avoided the comment. All he said was, it's going to be my ex's first time going to Disney, she's never been there. I let it be, moved on from it. 2 months later he brought it up again. I asked questions like who's all going, etc. He said my daughter, both my parents and my ex is going. I said okay. He brought up again and this time he mentioned a friend of his ex was going. and that made me feel some type of way, but I let it be out of respect for his daughter. He talked about it again today, said he wants to go fish out there, plans to stay longer with his dad, while his mom, daughter, his ex and ex-friend will come back sooner. I then said, "Oh, more people going?" He said yes, and that his ex's sister and BF will be meeting them up there. I couldn't stay quit any longer and asked him why wasn't I invited, since there seems to be a lot of more people going? And he told me he asked his ex if I could go and she said no. I asked why did she say no, and he said she just said no and she doesn't want to meet you. It hurt my feelings, and I told him it's very messed up for him to exclude me if he wanted me to be there, that his ex should suck it up, and that if he really wanted me there he should have stood up to her and let her know what he wanted. I understand it's his daughter's birthday trip and it's about her, but I just felt excluded from something important in his life that I wanted to be a part of. I guess I was wrong to assume of being included, and now he is mad at me because I made it a big deal and says he won't go. He should still go. All I wanted was to know why he didn't invite me. Now I feel horrible and wondering if I crossed the line. Voicing my feelings, am I the asshole for mentioning my dad's honeymoon location? I'm in my mid-20s and I live with my grandparents, my mother's parents. I was the result of a teenage pregnancy, and my parents have been split up since I left home at 18. My dad is getting remarried in a couple months, and while I don't keep in super close contact with him, the other day I was chatting with him on the phone about wedding-related stuff, and what's happening with his side of the family. That night, I was chatting with my grandparents and mentioned a few of the things we talked about in the conversation, like, oh, this aunt moved house, dad's going on a honeymoon to New Zealand. He had specifically said not to mention something about some Christmas plans, which I did not. Today he calls me up in a rage, saying that he's been telling people different locations for his honeymoon to find out how my mom knows things about him, saying she mentioned it in an email to him today. My stance on the issue has always been I won't be in the middle, and if they try I cut off contact for a few months. I told him I didn't know it was supposed to be secret. I chat about normal things that are happening in my life. To the family that I live with. Apparently I'm an adult who should have basic common sense to know that's a secret? Then when I started yelling back at him that he was trying to put me in the middle and divide my whole life up, he proceeded to disinvite me from the wedding and tell me to change my surname, because I've chosen my family. Am I the asshole for telling my husband I'm doing trying to help him lose weight? Edit, done trying to help him, not doing trying to help him. My F31, husband M34, have been together for 7 years, married too. Lately he has expressed disappointment in his weight gain and appearance. He's never been athletic or a big exerciser, but was always slender and lean. Maybe it's genes or age catching up to him, but he's gained about 30 pounds over 2 years, and his physical shows he has high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and vitamin D deficiency. His family also has a history of diabetes and heart disease, which he has been very concerned about since his physical. All these factors brought him to the decision that he needs to lose some weight and get a little more active. A few years ago I dropped 25 pounds and have kept it off. When I saw him struggling to stick to a diet, I offered to develop him a meal program and help him see it through. He's been diagnosed with ADHD and often struggles with planning and impulse control. He seemed excited for the help, but said he felt a little bad having me do extra work. I told him I'd love to help and I got right to work. I calculated his TDE and built a whole meal plan around his calorie goal to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Every weekend for a month, I cooked, packed, and labeled every meal for him. It was a large variety of dishes to keep it interesting and delicious. Every day before work, I'd pack him breakfast, lunch, and a snack. Dinner was also a meal prep when he got home. I explained to him that if he sticks to what I've made, he will stay within his calorie allowance and see results. Inexplicably, every week at his weigh-in, his weight went up 1 to 2 pounds. We moved his weigh-ins from Mondays to Fridays. I recalculated his TD. I reassessed my calorie calculation on my recipes. He wasn't weightlifting. He promised he was sticking to the meal preps. It didn't make sense why he'd be gaining weight. This morning, I reworded my questions a little. I asked him if he was eating anything at work besides the meal preps. He told me after he finishes his meal preps, he'll go to a restaurant near work and get another meal during lunch. He keeps a bag of candy in his desk to eat throughout the day. At night after I've gone to bed, he'll eat 2 to 3 meal preps or make a sandwich with a bowl of cereal. By my calculations, he was eating more than twice his max calorie range. He told me he thought when I said, sticking to the meal preps, that meant eating the entirety of the meal preps and then it wouldn't matter what additional stuff he ate, he'd still lose weight. I was frustrated, but I calmly told him there's no way he could have thought that's what I meant. I told him I'm sympathetic to his ADHD and how it might make this journey difficult, but if it's something he wants, he needs to try. He told me no one asked me to help him, so I told him, that's fair. I'm done trying to help you with this. And things have been weird between us since. TL, dear. I tried to help my husband, DX ADHD, stick to a meal plan to lose weight. He didn't stick to it and said he never asked for help, so I stopped. Am I the asshole for telling GF to go to the doctor? Am I the asshole for telling my girlfriend that she needs to get tested by a doctor in order for her to say, I'm autistic and I have ADHD? She constantly talks about this, and I don't understand how to even have the conversation with her, nor do I understand how to help her, and I'm honestly tired of hearing the same things over and over again about the different reasons as to why she has these conditions without being diagnosed. I am diagnosed ADHD and wouldn't have an issue. I don't have a problem with her being either or both and would be elated to know how I can support this, but what is even going on? Additional disclosure, I put the word soul, I'm autistic and I have ADHD, in quotes because SHE says that, not me you guys. I'm not equating being treated special to the care that ADHD or autism needs. I'm stating a reason someone would refuse treatment but still claim they are autistic/ADHD. Without a valid professional medical degree, you cannot assess that, and if you say that you can or you are doing it, I'm sorry to say, but you're wrong. You're not qualified to make that assessment. Update. Thank you everyone for all the insight and corrections. I appreciate all the opinions and feedback, but my question to everyone is, do you think that I should show her this? Am I the asshole for wanting my husband to confront my MIL for sharing our pregnancy news despite us asking to keep it private? I'm currently pregnant and wanted to keep it on the down low for now. My first pregnancy ended in loss, and this one is a multiples pregnancy, so I've been really anxious and hesitant to share. My husband and I told his mom and other close family early on with the clear request to keep it private until we were ready to tell others. We're only just finishing the first trimester, and recently I received a text from a family acquaintance congratulating us. Turns out they'd run into my MIL that morning and she'd shared the news. This isn't the first time she's gone against our wishes. Around 6 weeks, we learned she'd told an extended family member, even though we had specifically said we weren't ready to make it public and wanted to tell people ourselves when we felt comfortable. I feel hurt and frustrated that she's not respecting our wishes. I made it clear that I wasn't ready for this to be public knowledge, especially given my anxiety surrounding this pregnancy. I think I have a right to decide who I tell and when, especially with something so sensitive. My husband is also frustrated by his mom's actions and understands why this is so upsetting for me. However, he's hesitant to actually confront her about it. He feels that saying something would make her uncomfortable and potentially strain their relationship. He told me that if I feel strongly about it, I should be the one to address it with her directly. I feel like this puts me in an awkward position because I want him to handle it, but he's not willing to, despite knowing how much this is affecting me. Am I the asshole for wanting him to step up and say something rather than having me handle it? Am I the asshole if I tell my friend that she needs to be less clingy and learn to be more independent? I am 16M, and my two best friends are my twin sister, who is 16F, who I'll call Katie, and our 16F friend, who I'll call Montana. Don't get me wrong, Montana is a sweetheart, but she's just getting incredibly clingy towards me and Katie, and I'm worried about her. What's playing on my mind is a party we're going to this weekend. It's one of our friends' 18th birthday party, and Katie and I have both been looking forward to it for weeks. Most of our friends are attending, and we haven't seen a few of them in a while because they attend different schools. We were both looking forward to a night of fun and partying with them all. However, the host of the party messaged Katie last night asking if we were planning to bring Montana, to which she replied no. So he went and invited her, and now she's coming to the party. Normally, I'd be more than okay with this, except for the fact that Montana will only know a few people at the party, and she isn't good with large groups of people. She said she was not enthused about there being a lot of people there, so Katie kindly asked her how she planned to cope with that. Montana responded that she could just stick with us too. I was already planning to hang out with my other friends since I spend much less time with them than I do with her. I also have very different friendship dynamics with her. I'm just worried that she's going to cling to either Katie or me the entire time due to her being socially awkward, which she already does regularly. I know if she does do that, I'm well in my right to ask her to give me some space while I'm with my other friends. But at the same time, I'm also afraid of her feeling like I'm abandoning her and getting upset, which has happened before. An example of this is last year's New Year's Eve celebrations. Katie and I were planning to hang out with Montana, just the three of us, but she canceled a few days before. So, Katie and I went and made plans with other people. Then Montana was suddenly able to come along at the last minute, so she came along with us and the group we'd made plans with. When the group wanted to hang out at one of our friends' houses, she stayed behind because she was getting overwhelmed with the whole situation. Montana then got quite upset that we weren't spending time with her, which I understand. I get that she wants to spend time with the two of us. But I also wish she was able to accept that she is not the only person that we spend time with and that we won't drop plans with other friends just for her. I just really want her to be happy, but I also want a social life with other people, which makes me wonderful if I would be the asshole if I expressed how I feel to her. So, would I be the asshole if I were to tell her that she needs to learn to be less clingy and more independent? I'm also really sorry if my English is not the best. Edit. I'm planning on talking to Montana and making it clear that I have other friends I also want to spend time with. I've decided at the party I'm going to introduce Montana to my friends so hopefully she can get to know some of them. I've also worked out that if she starts to get clingy, I'll try to talk to her kindly about how I need some space and kindly encourage she makes the effort to talk to and get to know others than just Katie and I. Am I the asshole for making plans to go to my grandparents' house for the holidays instead of going home to Dad's? I'm 18F. Started college a few months ago and I moved out of my dad's house over the summer. Dad assumed that for the holidays and summer I would come back home to stay with him, his wife and my stepsister, 7F. But after thinking it over since September I decided to speak to my grandparents, my dad's parents, and asked if I could spend the holidays with them and they said yes. My dad's upset about this and so is my stepsister. My dad's wife is plain old pissed at me though. I have a reason I decided this. I was 14 when my dad and his wife got married and we moved in together 2 months before the wedding. At that point my stepsister was 3 and we had to share a bedroom until I moved out. If I go back to Dad's place I'll be forced to share a room with her again and I don't want that. I resented it when I still lived there and it made things awkward. Since they don't have another room that could double as a bedroom I'd only have that option if I stayed there. Last week my dad mentioned me coming home again and I told him what I decided to do instead. He was like, why would you do that? This is your home, and I told him I'd be more comfortable at my grandparents' since there's more space for me and a room to myself. He told me my room was still there for me too and I told him a room that I would be sharing with a young kid. My dad's wife was in the background and could hear what we were saying, and when Dad and I finished talking she called me up and she told me the fact I said a really young kid and not my sister spoke about what this was really about, and she told me I couldn't make it any clearer that I want to avoid her daughter, and then she told me her daughter would be so upset. A couple of days ago then my dad put my stepsister on the phone and she was asking if I was really not coming to stay and she started to cry and said she'd missed me and wanted to sleep in the room with me again. I told her I was sorry but that couldn't happen. My dad's wife tried to get my grandparents to agree to let my stepsister stay some nights I was there but they said no. The whole thing has become such a shit show. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for telling my cousin to stop inviting my ex to family events? I 25F recently. Broke up with my long-term boyfriend, 28M, and it's been tough but I'm getting through it. The problem is that my cousin, 24F, and my ex were always friendly, and now she insists on inviting him to family events like holidays and birthday parties. It makes me incredibly uncomfortable, especially because the breakup was a messy one and I'm still healing. I've talked to her multiple times, explaining how it feels awkward for me and asking if she could just keep her interactions with him outside of family events. She claims I'm being controlling and that it's her right to invite anyone she wants and I shouldn't be so sensitive. She's been posting photos with him on social media, and it just feels like she's intentionally making me uncomfortable. The rest of my family agrees with me, but she still insists that I'm overreacting. Am I the asshole for telling her to stop inviting my ex to family events? Am I the asshole for refusing to spend the holidays with my family? This year has been incredibly tough on my 18F family. My dad got seriously ill midway through the year, and he's now bedbound indefinitely. My mom has had to become his full-time caregiver. He's making progress, but it's slow, and I'm grateful he's still here. With all of this, I can already tell that the holidays will be quiet and somber. Last year's Christmas was disappointing. We tried to go out, but my dad didn't feel up for it and stayed in his room. My mom was down, and my brothers were glued to their screens, and I ended up ordering takeout and watching Love Actually again. After my exams this year, all I wanted was another excitement. A nice outing, a short trip, a get-together, anything. My best friend, 19F, decided to be my saving grace and invited me to her hometown for the holidays. It's 8 hours away by car in a tourist spot I've always wanted to visit, and we plan to meet up with friends and celebrate her 19th birthday. Her family was totally supportive, and I thought it would be a refreshing break after a hard year. But when I told my mom, she protested. Her reasons ranged from it's too far to your chores, and finally, Why would you want to spend Christmas with another family? I get that. It'd feel strange to her, and maybe she'd feel sad if I weren't there. But if I stay, I'll probably spend another holiday alone in my room. I wouldn't go if I thought my family would be genuinely upset by my absence on such a family-centered holiday, but honestly, whether I'm there or not won't make a big difference. We're not that type of family. The trip with my friend is only for a week out of a 2-month holiday before school resumes. I don't plan on going out much, so I'll still be spending plenty of time with my family at home during the rest of the holidays. It's not about avoiding them. I just want to enjoy this time in my life and have a change of scenery, especially after always having mediocre holidays. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, my mom is a good parent. My parents don't abuse me or make me do excessive chores. My mom's comment about chores and her argument about me going with another family was likely her way of finding a reason to object. My family isn't particularly close. Though we love each other, we're not the type to say it outright, and this becomes more apparent around the holiday season. That said, they still show up for my siblings and me in other ways. I just feel that my mom's arguments are her way of finding an excuse to hold on to me. I understand that late teens can be a challenging time for moms, so I get where she's coming from, but just know that I'm not suggesting she's the age here, but rather, I'm wondering if I'm being selfish in this situation. Am I the asshole for refusing to give my sister any help in anything ever? I, 16F, have one sister, 15. She has a temper and it makes her mean. When we were younger, it was over stuff that she believed I could do that she couldn't, but there was nothing. She'd say I got to do more extracurriculars than her, but we each had one. I was in a music class after school for 5 years and she did dance. My classes had more breaks than hers did, but we still only had one each. She'd get so mad at me for having more, and sometimes when I'd get back from class when she was on break, I'd come home to her dumping all my stuff all over the room. One time she threw stuff from the top of the stairs when Dad and I were coming in the door, and she broke a lot of toys. I was jealous that Mom and Dad bought her more stuff at Christmas when we were younger. At the time I thought they loved her more, but the stuff all added up to the same amount. I got less because my individual gifts cost more. But when my sister was mean, I'd argue that she got more than me. She'd still say I still got to do more stuff and it wasn't fair. When I was 10, she broke my guitar because she still believed I did more extracurriculars. My parents couldn't afford to replace it back then, and I decided to quit music lessons because I didn't like other instruments as much, except piano, but that was more expensive to learn and we never owned a piano, so practice was impossible. I hated her so much for it, but she would act so smug about it. She rubbed it in my face for years. When I got angry enough, I'd tell her I wish she wasn't my sister and I hated her. She'd say same. I started my period when I was 11 and I have endometriosis, only diagnosed this year, which causes me issues. I bleed a lot and have so much pain. My sister started calling me gross and would tell people at school about how gross I am, and she'd tell people about bleeding accidents I had. This is an ongoing problem and our parents punish her for it, and they try to make us talk our issues out, but it's a waste of time. They discipline me too if I express that I hate her. I try not to say it, but it's not a lie when I say it. I do hate her. And I'm not ashamed of hating the person who tries to make home and school hell for me. There are times my sister has needed help and I ignored it and did nothing, which came up a couple of days ago because my parents wanted me to tutor my sister in math. She always struggled with math, but now she's failing it and they want me to help her so she doesn't end up failing math all the way through high school. But I refused. I told them I would take them punishing me over helping her. My parents brought up how I never helped my sister and how she might bully me sometimes, but we're sisters and we should love each other, and as the older sister I should try to help when I can. I told them I'd take me unpunished. They told me I was being so stubborn and they've been mad the last couple of days. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for picking up my neighbor's lingerie? So there's this couple who lives across from me, as in our balconies face each other, on the floor above mine. Now ever since they moved in, I've noticed that wife tends to do her laundry typically on the same day, and she has her husband hang it out on their balcony to dry once it's finished. Now I don't know if he's just ignorant or just doesn't care, but he sort of just drapes the clothes over the railing rather than hanging them up properly. What ends up happening is that smaller and thinner pieces of clothing like lingerie, bras and underwear and whatnot end up falling off the railing, or the wind then carries them to my balcony. Even so, mistakes happen, so I take any that fell inside, make sure they get properly dried, and hold on to them until I can awkwardly return them the next morning. The wife is obviously embarrassed but thankful towards me for not letting her lingerie get lost. Fast forward many months and this is still happening like clockwork on a weekly basis. Me and the wife are now pretty much on an unofficial schedule that she comes by my apartment to pick up her lingerie the morning after laundry day. It doesn't matter how many times she tells her husband to fix the problem, it never changes. She works during the time they need to be hanged so she can't do it herself. Now after all of this, I run into her husband one afternoon and he's annoyed at me. He didn't shout, more sharply worded, but he made his point clear. He doesn't like what I've been doing. I shouldn't be touching his wife's lingerie, let alone keeping it overnight in my apartment. According to him, me taking a married woman's intimate clothing is creepy and violating. And if I was really just returning it, I wouldn't keep it overnight and instead come to their apartment late at night to return it immediately. He also spent a while completing that his wife was giving him a hard time for how he was hanging the clothes thanks to me, calling it an asshole move on my part. I don't believe I'm the asshole in this situation. I'm the one making up for his mistakes and returning the lingerie to its owner at my earliest convenience, like a good neighbor should do. I get that it's a very intimate item, but I feel like I'm innocent here. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for telling my mom not to invite a racist for Christmas? I, 27F, and my best friend, 27F, have known each other since we were little kids. At this point, we're more like sisters than friends. My friend, I'll call her Jessica, grew up never liking sympathy. She grew up with a brilliant single mom, let's call her Allison. She always taught Jessica to never judge a person based on race, sexuality, etc. Last year, Jessica went through a really rough time. She lost her dream job and ended a 5-year relationship with her boyfriend, 28M. A few months later, she has a fling with this guy, 23M, who we'll call Greg. It started very casual. Greg didn't want anything serious at all. He told friends Jessica was too skinny and too much drama. This stuff got back to Jessica, and although it really upset her, they still did hook up because, again, nothing serious. Jessica told me about all his red flags. He had a son from a previous fling, she hates the idea of being a stepmom, he was part of a dangerous motorbike gang, and worst of all, he had a real problem with black people. She refused to say in detail, but it was stuff she was horrified by. Greg even announced that he didn't care that he was a racist, even wore it proudly. I was shocked and said, "Surely you won't see him again." She explained that it was just sex, and she's told him she didn't want to hear any more racist stuff. She comforted me by saying it would likely fizzle out soon. Suddenly, just after Christmas last year, Allison died. She's never been a healthy woman, but it still felt sudden. With Allison gone, my parents and I were the closest to family Jessica had. As she had all of her life, she'd only accept comfort for a short amount of time. Still, I stayed with her that night. Allison wasn't rich, but being the only family, Jessica was set to inherit a lot of money. Greg suddenly became very interested in having a serious relationship with her. Talks of Greg being her boyfriend, of them getting pets together, of them moving in together. Short of having a full-on argument, I questioned Jessica as to why on earth she was getting serious with this racist. She'd argue that I didn't know him like she did. It's too convenient that this guy suddenly doesn't mind the drama once she inherits a huge sum of money. Traditionally, because it was just Jessica and Allison for years, they'd come for Christmas dinner at my parents' house. My mom decided this year, despite my mistrust and dislike of Greg, to invite him to Christmas. I still have never met him and he's coming on Christmas. I told my mom how against the idea I was. I've been losing sleep worrying, and I ended up in tears at how messed up the whole situation seems. How I feel alone and seeing how this guy is preying on my grieving friend. My mom said he'd uninvited him months ago, but a conversation with Jessica the other week proves she never did. I feel almost gaslit at this point. Greg is clearly not a good man, and we all have to just accept this isn't messed up. I'm blind. I'm not sure how many steps my staircase has. I've always been blind, and that's fine by me. I'm glad I never got to see and then lose my sight. That would have been too depressing. Instead, I don't get to mourn something I've never had. I've lived in this Upper East Side flat for a really long time. As a writer, it's important for me to have my own space. I've been told my writing style is exquisite. Because I cannot see, I focus on the other senses and my writing shines by stimulating them. I don't say a red apple, red has no meaning for me. I say warm, firm and sour, a bit sweet, fits in your hand, smells of grass and childhood. I'm not gonna lie, this flat was nice for a while but really tiny, and I want to learn to play the piano. So, naturally, since I've saved up a lot of money from my works, I bought this beautiful mansion in the suburbs. At least, that's how my friends and family called it. I don't care, I can't see anyway. I just needed to feel the warm sunlight in the kitchen and the crisp air from my balcony, while I drink my coffee in the morning and listen to the birds. And I work, day and night. People thought it would be a problem if my house had an upper floor. Because according to them, even if I've lived my whole life blind, I cook, chop up things, take baths and clean the house, I apparently can't climb some damn stairs. No problem for me. I counted the steps of my staircase. 14. Eventually, I got used to it and I even started going up and down the stairs faster, since I knew exactly how many steps I needed to climb. That's the thing when you're blind. Some movements become reflexes. Since you live alone, you learn how to position certain things and you always find them in the same place. One day, however, I was going down the stairs and I tripped. Where I expected the floor to be, there was this additional step and I didn't think much of it. Figured I must have not paid attention. I mean, yes, it was odd because after 30 years of being blind, tripping wasn't really a common thing, but I didn't look much into it. However, when I went up again, I tripped at the top. That was definitely unusual. Sure as it was one extra step. I went back the stairs and counted. 15. Counted again. 14. The fuck? Sure enough, 14 steps. Whatever. I went to sleep. A few days passed and I didn't trip anymore. I played it off as some error my tired mind made. Then one night as I went downstairs to get a glass of water, I tripped again. This time I really fell down on my foot. That was not a skipped step. There were at least 2 additional steps. I felt around and stood up. My foot hurt a lot, but the ankle was good. I couldn't really stand up on it, but no serious damage. I went up, carefully counting. 16. What the fuck? Sure, you mess up, you count 1 more or 1 less. But 2 more? The house was so still, so silent. No birds, no bees, no cars passing. Normal people fear the darkness, I fear the silence. I went down the stairs again, counting. By the time I reached the bottom, I counted 14. Again. I went up again. 18. That was absolutely ridiculous. Was someone messing with me? How could they even mess with me like that? I've never heard of a burglar to break into someone's house and add steps to their stairs. Still, I went to check to see if I locked the door. I can make my way around pretty neat. Went through the kitchen, then into the hallway. And then I bumped into something. I froze. My organs tensed up, my hair stood up, all ears. I had never felt so much fear in my life. Decided to go on and check the door. Yeah, locked. I made my way back upstairs and this time I didn't bump into anything. Or anyone. For fuck's sake. All night, all I did was go up and down like a lunatic. Each time I got different results. Back upstairs, I decided to go down and make one final count. 14. Okay, it is probably going to be more. 15. Nope, still going. 17. 19. 21. That's a record. 27. 33. That could not be possible. 52. 88. I could absolutely feel the sense of impending doom. Something was there with me. And it was vile, disgusting, and unnatural. And this staircase was never ending. 102. I finally gave up. Whatever this was, I didn't want to reach the bottom. I went back up. The moment I turned my back to go up, I tried to be brave, but something got over me and I ran on all fours, desperate to reach the top, desperate to run back to my bedroom. I don't remember how I got inside and locked my door, but I did. And now I'm sitting here and typing. This house is strange. It is eerie and disturbing. And I think if I'd gotten to the bottom of the staircase, I would have left this world. I don't think that was my house anymore. However, no matter what stupid, cryptic, eerie, unnatural staircase I unveiled, it is important not only that I don't go down there, but that nothing comes up either. And right now, I can hear it creaking. I just found my wife outside. I'm sitting here freaking out. It's 3:17 a.m. and I just found my wife outside. This is going to be a mess as I'm still shaking, but let me explain it as best I can. So a bunch of years ago we lived in another house. One night I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard noises coming from the other half of the house. I quietly opened the bedroom door and immediately saw a light on in my wife's study, which was situated next to the kitchen. The house we lived in was a few blocks away from the bad neighborhood, so my immediate thought was that someone had broken in and was going through the stuff in my wife's room, as my wife had come to bed with me several hours prior and as far as I knew, she was still in bed. I crept through the house and was ready to confront the person in the room, when I realized that it was my wife. In my still half-asleep state, I just assumed she was still in bed. Turns out she had woken up and couldn't get back to sleep, and so went to her room to browse Facebook or whatever for a while. I had almost confronted my own wife thinking she was a burglar. Now in our current house we have a screen door and a wooden door. The wooden door has a deadbolt on it, and you have to make sure that you take the house keys with you because if you close the wooden door, you're not getting back in unless you grab the hidden spare key or knock on the door/window to be let back in. So it's about an hour ago, I'm woken up by the front door rattling. I immediately grab my phone and pull up the security camera located right by the front door. To my surprise, I see my wife standing there, kinda shivering. It's definitely her because we've been married over a decade and I know what my own wife looks like. She's dressed in the same clothing she wore today, a red top and black pants. 100% her. I don't know what she's doing outside, but she is. Confused, I roll over and there's my wife fast asleep. Remembering the incident in our last place, I use my phone screen to shine a light on her and confirm that it's definitely her and she's definitely in the bed. At this point I'm really confused. I get up and make my way through the house to the front door. As I walk into the lounge room, our cat looks up at me, half asleep. Normally she's super curious about stuff going on outside, and I would have thought that hearing the screen door rattling would have caused her to be at the door trying to see what's going on, but it's as if she hasn't heard a thing. I stand by the door and call out, "Who is it?" "It's me, hurry up and let me back in, I'm freezing." I went outside because I heard something but forgot to take the keys in my bag with me. That absolutely sounds like my wife. Accent, intonation, knowledge about where her set of keys are, everything. But I'm not convinced because I've just seen her sleeping in the bed with my own eyes. "Hold on a second," I tell her. Now I'm heading back through the house and into the bedroom. I wake up my wife and say, "This is really fucking weird, you have to see this." I open the camera app and show her the front door. She's still at the door looking around, wondering what I'm doing because all I need to do to let her back in is turn the handle on the deadbolt and open the door. My wife says, "What the fuck? When was that recorded?" I tell her, "It's not. This is live. You're standing outside by the front door. I just went down there and asked who it was, and your voice told me it was you and that I should let you back in because you're freezing and you left your keys in your bag." My wife gets up and peers through the bedroom window, as you can just see the front door alcove from there. She gasps and pulls the curtains shut. She turns around and I'll never forget the look on her face as long as I live. She's terrified. "That's me," she says. At this point I'm freaked the fuck out. I'm wide awake. I'm speaking to my wife and I'm physically touching her while trying to peer out the window with her, but there she is, standing outside in the very outfit she wore today. Same hair, same glasses, same everything. We walk into the lounge room and I grab the big torch I have. It's a big sturdy metal super bright light, great for blinding people and hitting them if they get too close. We stand by the door again. "What's your name?" I ask. She tells me her full name including her middle name. It's correct. "What's your birth date?" She tells me. It's also correct. "What did we have for dinner tonight?" She tells me this too and tells me that I cooked it. This is right too. I can hear my real wife standing next to me trying to control her breathing as she's scared out of her wits. I nudge her and whisper, "Ask her something only you would know." After a moment to steady herself and think of something, she speaks. "When we last stayed with my parents, what change had Dad made to my old room?" There was a pause. "Who is that?" the person outside said. "Why aren't you letting me in? You know it's me. You're starting to freak me out here. Who is that inside with you? Is that a recording of me? What's going on here?" I said, "Answer the question. What change had been made to your room when we last visited?" Another pause, then finally, There was a second bed added as Max and Damien, my brother-in-law's two kids, sleep in there while visiting Mom and Dad. There's an audible gasp from my wife next to me. Now we're both freaked out. I grab her hand and lead her back into the bedroom and turn the lights on. We're still awake watching the cameras. The other person walked towards the backyard, presumably to grab the spare key, but that was about 40 minutes ago and I haven't seen them since. I'm too shit scared to go to bed because I'm scared that this person who knew everything about my wife will find the spare key and enter. I don't know who the fuck they really are or what they want, but I'm not sleeping. My husband started teasing me after I suffered a serious head injury. I literally can't go on like this. Back before my head injury, my husband and I had this cheesy ritual. If I ever got held up late at the office and needed to catch the last train home, he'd wait for me at the station and accidentally brush against me as I disembarked at the platform. He'd put on a bashful voice, acting like we were meeting for the first time, and say, "I'm sorry I bumped into you, ma'am. It's just you've the most distracting green eyes. Could I maybe walk you home?" And every damn time, it made me melt like butter in a hot pan. Yes, I know I'm lame. But one night, the platform was empty when those automatic doors hissed shut behind me. My stomach lurched. Exiting the station, a concrete set of stairs spat you out into a long, filthy, poorly lit underground tunnel, and this was the real reason for Darren and I's tradition. Because neither of us liked the idea of me walking home by myself. As my calls went unanswered, I stood there, my leg bouncing up and down. Lampposts flicked. on beyond the iron fence surrounding the station, and the sky grew darker until, finally, I saw no choice other than to set off as quickly as I could. Inside the underpass, sputtering halogen bulbs were spaced out every 10 meters or so. I half walked, half jogged from one flickering pool of light to the next, inhaling through my mouth to avoid the combined stink of 1,000 relieved bladders. Halfway along, a rapid skitter of footsteps rushed up behind me. I spun around. My chest collided with something solid, then two hands shot out and grabbed me by the wrists. In the dim light, I could make out dark hair and a set of deep blue eyes. I heaved a giant sigh of relief. "Darren." "Darling," the man answered. Altogether, the hairs along my arms and neck stood on end. It wasn't my husband. My brain went into full-blown panic mode, which means the rest of the encounter is still a giant blur, but I know I lashed out with punches and kicks. My fingernails raked the man's left eye and gouged his nose. He kept yelling something, but it was impossible to hear beneath my screams bouncing off the walls. At one point I bit down on his hand hard, and his skin's rough texture is the part clearest in my mind. After that, there are images of me lying in a gathering pool of blood while the man apologizes, and if I really squint my memory, there's confused glimpses of sharp teeth intermixed with a haze of darkness. From there, everything jump cuts to a ring of empty faces towering over me. Those faces were like the expressionless mannequins you see in shop windows. With my heart in my throat, I thrashed around in a soft bed, screaming until the mannequins rushed to restrain me. Then I rode off into a wave of blackness. Next time the world slid into focus, a single mannequin was beside my bed, dressed in a nurse's uniform. A soft, disembodied voice came floating along, promising everything would be okay. From somewhere close by, the continuous beep 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 of a heart monitor gathered speed, and gradually I realized I was in a hospital. I swallowed a lump and asked the nurse what happened to her face. The voice asked what I meant. I said the nurse's skull looked as if when God designed her he'd loaded up Photoshop and gone crazy with the smudge tool. It was a smooth mound of pink flesh. The faceless nurse explained I'd suffered a serious head injury, and showered me with kindness and support while a series of torches got shown in my eyes and my vitals got checked a dozen or so times. The voice kept telling me not to move around too much, otherwise the stitches across the top of my head might have popped loose. Another figure with an empty skull, this one dressed in a doctor's coat, came and stood at the foot of my bed, and that's when I first heard the term prosopagnosia, also known as face blindness. The condition can result from a traumatic brain injury. What followed was a flurry of activity. Darren, who I only recognized by his haircut and voice, was allowed to sit with me. I squeezed his hand throughout the onslaught of tears and endless visits from neurologists. On his way to the station the night of the attack, Darren had seen a newly licensed teen driver slam on their brakes way too late to stop at a red light. An old lady got sent careening into the air, and Darren called for an ambulance while he applied pressure to the poor woman's chest to keep her from bleeding out. That was the reason he missed my calls. A woman named Tracy and her German Shepherd, Buster, were drawn to the tunnel by my screams. Tracy sicked Buster on my attacker, who bolted off in the direction of the station, covered in my blood. Both Tracy and Buster visited me at the hospital, and we posed for a photo which made the front page of the local newspaper. The story about a hero dog included a blurb about my condition, even though we specifically asked the reporter not to include it. Two police officers, who I could only distinguish by their difference in height, questioned me about my attacker. Judging by their irritated voices, they'd hoped to learn more than his hair looked sorta like Darren's. Although it took days of interrogation, I convinced Darren to reveal what else authorities knew about the man. It turned out, after Buster chased him to the platform, the bastard took off running along the curved track. Tracy called the police, who went after him, flashlights in hand, but only discovered a discarded backpack a quarter-mile north. So far as anybody could tell, my attacker dropped it climbing a fence to escape into the loading bay of a warehouse. Inside the pack they found creep shots of me, along with journal entries and love letters filled with strange details about our supposed relationship. The officer said he might have been stalking me for as long as half a year, living out a fantasy in which we were husband and wife. Their promises they'd have him in custody soon rang a little hollow. In the weeks I spent confined to the ward, I got a crash course in how difficult life with prosopagnosia really is. Dressed in their identical hospital gowns, my fellow patients were impossible to tell apart unless they had a unique feature, like green nail polish, and I suffered a mild panic attack every time somebody in my inner circle changed their hairstyle or bought a new outfit. After a whirlwind of scans and tests, the doctor suggested I should consult a specialist, although I could tell they hadn't much faith I would ever recover. Good thing I never wanted to be a police sketch artist, because some of the creep shots were taken from the back garden. Darren and I moved to a new house on the opposite side of town. Anytime I caught a glimpse of my reflection, my pulse launched into the stratosphere, so I insisted we not keep any mirrors. Early one morning, a fortnight later, a stranger with a profile matching my attacker's knocked on the front door. I'd already grabbed a vase that sat on a nearby side table when, in a silly voice, Darren said he was sorry to bother me, but that I had the most beautiful eyes he'd ever seen and presented me with a bouquet of roses. He was teasing me again, playing make-believe like old times. Now on the verge of a heart attack, I told him I needed to sit. He apologized 1,000 times. I told him it was okay, but that I'd prefer we never did that silly roleplay game ever again. He of course agreed. In the weeks that followed, my confidence in my ability to read people swelled. Everybody had a tell, be it a tendency to wear noisy jewelry, or a compulsive habit of scratching their ear. In time, I adapted to this new way of seeing, or not seeing, the world. Until tonight. There we were, watching Rick and Morty in the bedroom. I'd never liked cartoons before, but since the Diagnosis live-action stuff had become tricky to follow, so I gravitated towards anything with bright colors and distinct patterns. Afterwards, as I lay facing the wall and scrolling through Reddit, Darren pulled on his navy robe and shuffled off downstairs to use the bathroom. I was still reading the same post when footsteps came marching along the hall. Straight away my skin prickled. What? Was it the speed? Or maybe the rhythm? As the door creaked open, I glanced over at Darren, still in his robe. By the time he crossed the room and slid in next to me, my spine was slicked with sweat. I could still smell the woody scent of his cologne, so what set off the alarm bells in my mind? As an arm reached out and coiled around my stomach, my heart thrashed against my chest. At the corner of my eye, a blank face stared straight at me, silent and unmoving. The way that rough hand probed my stomach and the taste of those foul breaths, it all evoked memories of the tunnel. I rolled toward the wall, suddenly trapped beneath the hot cavern of bedclothes, and that brings us to now. I can't tell if I'm being paranoid or if the figure beside me is my stalker posing as my husband. If it is my stalker, he must have learned about my condition from the article and is living out his fantasy. I'm afraid what might happen if I run or call the police. I'm not even letting myself think about what happened to Darren. But it could also be I'm freaking out over nothing like before. There's no way to be sure without making it obvious I'm suspicious. So I'm just gonna lie here pretending to browse Reddit until whoever's beside me's breaths fall into a slow, rhythmic pattern. Then I'll slip away as quietly as I can. So if you don't hear from me again, you'll know my instincts were correct. Wish me luck. Am I the asshole for telling my mom to ask my brother to help with writing the paper to transfer the inheritance from me to him? My parents initially gave me a piece of property, but later decided to transfer it to my brother instead. I told my mom that I have no problem with this decision. However, due to property laws in my country, this transfer process will be tedious. While I don't mind my brother having the property, I feel he should take responsibility for handling the inheritance transfer paperwork. My reasons are, 1. I work full-time and have kids to take care of, so my days are already packed. And 2. Since he is the beneficiary of this transfer, he should assume a larger share of the responsibility. What makes me feel slightly guilty for not helping my parents more with the paperwork is that my brother is only 18. He may be too young to handle this entirely on his own. But I do want him to at least research the process or draft some paperwork, as I don't want the responsibility to fall solely on me. Also, he's just finished all his entrance exams and has about 2 months before starting college, so he isn't currently occupied with anything major. Please let me know if I'm unreasonable for declining to take on this responsibility alone. Edit to add asterisk. Thanks, everyone, for your comments and advice. It's now settled that my brother will do most of the work, and I'll provide him with guidance. Am I the asshole for refusing to make calls to social services on my girlfriend's behalf? My 30-year-old male partner, 29-year-old female, has phone anxiety and executive dysfunction. Because of this, I often have to manage things like bills and coordinating repairs, and I've more or less accepted that responsibility. Without disclosing our location, she's been unemployed for nearly 2 years and has been on social services payments during this time. I've been, and still am, working full-time. She has a fair amount of savings from her previous job, and we currently live with my parents, so we don't have many household expenses at the moment. Though of course her income is limited. Recently, we went on an extended vacation, and before we left, I told her to notify social services about her absence so they could pause her payments while she was out of the country. 4 weeks into the trip, she missed an international call from them, and afterward, received a notification saying she now owes them money. Obviously, she hadn't informed them before we left. I didn't scold her as that wouldn't help, but I suggested she take care of it when we returned. Now 2 weeks after. Getting back, she came to me while I was working from home, saying she was too anxious to call them and sort it out. I offered to be there on hold with her since I needed to keep working. She then asked if I could make the call myself during my lunch break. I declined, as these calls often take an extremely long time, likely extending beyond my break and into my work hours. She's now calling me selfish and says I'm the asshole for refusing. Later, I asked if she had made the call and she responded, "Why does it matter to you?" Additional context *, I'm currently in therapy for several personal issues. She's on the spectrum and hasn't been to therapy in years, though I've encouraged her to resume. She says the cost is prohibitive, and to be fair, it's quite expensive. When we go to couples therapy, I'm also the one who covers the expense. The social services line is only open during standard work hours. While my workload varies, I can get client calls unexpectedly, so I'm expected to be available and responsive during work hours. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole if I get birds instead of helping my sisters? I, 34-year-old female, bought a large Victorian manor fixer-upper a few years ago. It's been a massive labor of love. Everything needed replacing from the roof down to the studs. Little by little, I've put in the work to make it my own. One of the unique features of the house is a very large glass atrium/aviary located in the center. It spans all 4 stories, doming out over the roof like a skylight. Inside, there's a mature tree that reaches up to the 3rd floor, along with other vegetation, a small koi pond and 2 benches. It's truly the focal point of the house and was what sold me on buying it. Now that the house renovations are nearly complete, including work on the atrium, I'm getting ready to bring in birds. Every month, a professional comes by to check the thermostat, humidity, misters, water pH, and other essentials. On his next visit, he'll bring the birds and teach me how to care for them in between visits. It's a huge commitment, but I'm excited for it. I have 2 sisters, Ashley, 25 years old, and Katerina, 36 years old. Our relationship is strained because they generally treat me as a financial resource. Over the past year, I've started setting boundaries with them, refusing to pay their rents, car notes, and allowances. I encouraged them both to get jobs, which they didn't appreciate, arguing that family helps family, and since I'm doing well financially, I should support their very expensive lifestyles. In a recent conversation, I mentioned my excitement about getting the birds, as I had birds growing up and have been looking forward to this for a long time. My older sister said that keeping birds indoors is animal abuse and threatened to call animal services on me. My younger sister chimed in, saying it was a waste of money and that I could be helping them instead, especially since they missed their usual summer vacation, which I had always funded. They went on so harshly that I started to tear up. My younger sister later apologized, admitting she was harsh but saying I needed to hear the truth. My older sister stood firm, saying she had nothing to apologize for. I left their apartment on bad terms. They're still upset, saying that blood is thicker than water, or in this case, birds. I worry that I may have been so focused on my excitement that I'm being selfish. My responsibilities toward them seem endless and exhausting, and I just wanted to have something for myself. But maybe they're right and I'm being the asshole for prioritizing birds over family. **I appreciate everyone's support. It strengthened my resolve to go low contact for now. Also, I've received messages accusing me of destroying a historic home, which couldn't be farther from the truth. I restored it to its original glory, including intricate crown moldings, gold inlays, and the sweeping front banisters, even restoring the dumbwaiter. This restoration took blood, sweat, and tears, and it was never a DIY job.
Am ideation for possibly killing adult me family and our beneficially from me parents our house in a relocation, and we've been in talk with an investor about building a large apartment complex here. I have 2 sisters, both married with 2 kids. In our culture, property tradition restoration to keep it in the family name, book IV and way to me parents I wanting to be FI. Regardless of the outcome, I plan to give 50% of the property to my sister, and the rest of this. Recently, my sister have been indirectly pressing my parents, especially my mother, to agree with the investor, and they are already making inheriting plan. I see this as a bit greedy. My parents are ready, my dad is thinking of moving, and my mother is doing it for our future. Financial, I'm doing well, while my sister and her husband are struggling. Hay pushing other facing challenge, and even them significant among over time without affecting repaying, family is family. Also semi parents money monthly for living expenses and additional support for any home repair or replacement. My sister. Don't contribute financial, but they are physically present for me parents since Eli abroad. What really upset me was when one of my brother-in-law overstepped his role. Since I'm not physically to negotiate, he was supposed to act as a mediator. Instead, he started negotiating directly with the investor and even to me what he shall accept, trying to convince me it was a good deal. He called me parents to say he was going to put a stop to all this interference, as it felt like there were too many people involved, including the investor. My father agreed, but my mother thought he was overstand. At that point, he lost me temper and sight, so the song shall stay on the side while the sons-in-law made on the decision. He might apple good to a lot of people, as he readily agree or accept me say when it comes to family matter. Today, he collect the investor and lie out exactly what we wanted, saying we didn't need any further back and forth, just a simple yes or no will suffice. He tried to pressure me to love our Effectino, and what really set me off was when he said, the other powerful people, they can fiat the property, block construction, or even rerun it to be a parking lot. It felt like a trick, and he don't risking the to stay tactic. Generally, he kept me cung and told him either get back to him. He then called me Jack, as like the Situtino, and said he planned to tell the investor to back off. He called him again and made it clear, this is the price, no meeting, no can look, and he don't appreciate. He panicked and apologized, but he cut him off, saying that it's fine, a parking lot sounds nice anyway. Not everything in life is about money. Later, my mom called and said either overread and potentially blow a great opportunity. I told her, how long will you sacrifice your dignity for money? It will only make her angry. Now I'm left wondering if he was wrong and they song for how he handled this situation.
Am I the asshole for not reacting properly to my friend group's surprise Airbnb booking? Context. Every year, our friend group hosts a Secret Santa event. A significant part of this tradition involves booking an Airbnb where most of us, around 12 people, plan to stay, though not everyone ends up sleeping there. Typically, we spend a few hours on Discord searching for Airbnbs that meet our criteria, location, capacity, budget, etc., and bookmark options for further review. This year, our entire group followed the usual process, spending hours searching listings and bookmarking potential choices to revisit later. Then about 2 weeks ago, half of the group, let's call them Group B, suddenly stopped communicating with us, Group A, and went completely silent on Discord for an entire week. This abrupt change left Group A confused, prompting us to ask questions about what was going on and why Group B had stopped communicating with us. A few days later, Group B's main planner, the person who typically leads our event coordination, announced that he had booked a surprise Airbnb that was within budget and located in a great area. While Group A appreciated the effort, we requested more details, wanting at least some basic information about the place. However, the planner refused to provide any specifics, repeatedly responding with "trust me" and informing us that each participant would need to contribute $60. More details on that later. As days passed, Group A grew increasingly confused and uneasy about this Airbnb, which we were expected to help pay for, without any assurance or photos of what we were actually funding. Then a friend close to some members of Group B, we'll call him Jay, let us know that the planner had recently purchased a house where everyone in Group B would be moving in. While we recognized this as an impressive feat for Group B, we were still confused by their continued insistence on presenting it as an Airbnb that we needed to contribute $60 per person toward. With this information, Group A tried to get confirmation from Group B, but they wouldn't budge, even as the Secret Santa event came closer. Jay also told us that part of the so-called surprise was that we wouldn't actually need to pay anything, since the planner owned the house. Finally, last night, Group B revealed the truth. They had moved into a newly acquired house, and it would be the location for our Secret Santa event. Group A wasn't thrilled about the week of lies and secrecy over something we had initially believed was an Airbnb we were expected to fund. Group B is unhappy with us, claiming that we acted immaturely by not being more supportive of their actions and getting this house for our event. Am I the asshole for making them feel disappointed in us by reacting in a disgruntled and annoyed manner? My Fleshgate encounter. I had been homeless for 2 years when I found this shady acre apartments complex. Before that, I had been sleeping on the roadways and behind dumpsters, which were some of the lowest points in my life. Having found the mostly completed apartments being abandoned before they were officially completed was like hitting the jackpot for someone like me. Tucked away in a cleared lot nestled against the woods on the slower part of town, the Shady Acres were a complex for newer families and lower-income individuals, but somehow it found itself never being finally completed. The walls were not painted and the flooring were not installed, but aside from the minor features, the place was practically livable. Of course, the electric wasn't working alongside the water and plumbing, but as the saying goes, beggars can't be choosers. I peeked my head inside as I entered the first floor. Tools, materials, and odds and ends still laid strewn about as if someone was going to come back to finish the job or at least clean up their mess, but it appeared that no one ever did. I grabbed a sizable pipe laying on the ground just in case. Homeless people, if startled, can and will turn violent very quickly. I did a brief inspection of the main floor, peeking my head inside of ways to confirm that I was alone in a substantially sized building, but sure enough, I couldn't find anyone else. As I inspected the main floor, I found a stairway. A metal door once stood in the way but now laid on the ground. It was clear that someone damaged it with some type of tool in order to keep it open. I went to the stairway and looked inside. The natural light provided by the sun, aided by the many open windows, could only spill over so much. Inside was a set of stairs going but both upwards and down below. I didn't have a flashlight, but what little natural sun entered the stairway was just enough to give me the courage to explore upwards, giving off just enough light to give me courage to see the second floor. I went up the metal stairs quietly so as to not alarm anyone else to my presence here. The second floor was nearly identical to the first. I walked down the halls gripping the pipe, ready to defend myself from an unknown attack. Again, much like the first floor, I didn't see anyone. However, I did find troubling signs of people having lived here at one point. I saw an old mattress littered with trash and old cigarettes, clothes tossed in a pile in the corner of the room. Several dark stains covered the floor and one splattered on the wall next to the head of the mattress. My heart sank. It was more than likely something sinister had been committed here. I was going to turn to leave, but alongside the disheartening evidence of someone being here, I found a flashlight and an old pistol. I took both and checked the gun to see 3 bullets remaining in the cylinders. I was going to leave, but seeing now that I had a gun and a flashlight, this changes things. The flashlight worked perfectly, emitting a strong blue LED light on the stained wall when I clicked it on. I still kept the pipe with me as a backup, but the pistol was now gripped firmly in my right hand. The second floor had bits and pieces of trash here and there, but nothing as concerning than what was in that one room. I entered the stairwell with my flashlight guiding me. Unlike the first 2 floors, the third floor had an actual door standing at the entrance. Lucky for me, the handle turned slowly and granted me access. A quick inspection of the door revealed a marvelous find. This door could be locked from the inside. If this floor was cleared, this would be a magnificent setup. I could lock the door and prevent any vagrants much like myself coming up here and killing me in my sleep. All I would have to do was verify that the floor was clear and I would be all set. The third floor had varied greatly from the first 2. No bits of drywall on the floor or discarded nails laying haphazardly. There still wasn't electricity, but nothing my new flashlight couldn't handle. The floor was unfinished but oddly clean, as if it was getting prepped for carpet or new flooring before this place shut down. I cleared each room slowly, making sure to check every closet and cupboard before finally letting my guard down. I went back to the stairway and locked the door to prevent anyone else from coming up. I picked a room facing the parking lot, that way I could look out and see if anyone was coming. I spent the rest of the day in my newfound home. The flashlight and gun were an amazing find, but that unsettling sight of the blood-stained floor and walls was something that still concerned me. Maybe it was something else, perhaps someone spilled something and it just looked bad? I thought to myself, trying to not freak myself out so much. The thought also crept into my mind about how I yet to inspected the basement and what horrors lurked down there. For being homeless, I was fairly paranoid. I made myself a game plan for tomorrow that I would go out and find cheap furniture and food to fill my bare-bone apartment. It would take several trips, but well worth the effort. Nighttime and boredom eventually found me. I sat in the corner of the room trying to get comfortable and let sleep carry me into tomorrow, but it was difficult. Sure enough, I managed to fall asleep, but staying asleep was another story. I woke up. In the middle of the night, I didn't have anything to check the time with, but it was several hours before the sun would be rising. I got up feeling the urge to go to the bathroom. This complex didn't have running water, so I would have to go outside to relieve myself. I grabbed the gun and flashlight and walked over to the stairway and unlocked the door. I went down the 2 flights of stairs and walked out back to go to the bathroom. The back of the complex was as neglected as the complex itself. Tall weeds filled the field that stretched out to the dark trees. Moonlight was scarce and a cool chill breezed over me as I went to the bathroom. I glanced at the complex as I did my business. Anxiety had yet to find me as I was still sleepy. I could hear cars off in the distance from the nearby highway, but no animal life could be heard. It was probably too cold for them, I thought as I pulled my pants up and made my way inside. I entered the hollow shell of the first floor. Stealth was not my main concern, seeing as that sleep was my only goal. I entered the stairway, ready to ascend back up to my room of safety when I stopped. For the briefest of moments, I could have sworn I heard what sounded like mumbling down below. My flashlight was on, but I didn't dare shine it down into the basement. In fact, a moment curiosity washed over me as I turned my light off and listened in the stairway. I gripped the gun as I stepped onto the stairs that led downwards. My suspicions were confirmed as I felt my way down a step or two to hear more clearly the rambling of someone down here. I paused for a moment, unsure of what to do. Whoever was down here sounded as if they were speaking and no one else was responding. Perhaps a mentally ill person took shelter down here. I walked back up the stairs silently as the soft mumblings of whoever was down there slowly faded beneath the stairs. I was fairly fit and mentally strong, so having an interaction with anyone would be more likely in my favor. I made it to the 3rd floor and the sound was no longer existent. It was clear that the distance between us had enough cushion to drown out the sounds from either of us, which was relieving. I made sure to lock the door to the stairway before heading back to my room. Although the realization I wasn't alone in this building was brief and honestly quite harmless, it made finding sleep all the more difficult. I don't know if I slept much that night, but I woke up feeling very tired. I got up and glanced out the window to see the complex parking lot empty and the sun beaming over the distant trees. I unlocked the stairway door and went down the stairs and outside. I spent the day in town getting things ready for my new place. The local thrift store had a cheap air mattress that I purchased, but it didn't come with a pump. I loaded up with other essentials like huge gallon-sized jugs of water and food that was easy to make or didn't require power. After making a trip or two back to the empty complex, my room was decent enough for me to not have to worry about it for a week or so. The only thing I wasn't able to work out was the bathroom situation, which would require me to go down the sets of stairs and out back facing the woods. I was going to go in the basement later that day, but got caught up doing other things, and by the time I was available the sun had set. This wouldn't affect the actual lighting of the basement obviously, but I didn't want to face whatever was down there and come up to a pitch black night. Besides, whoever was down there didn't seem aware of me or my setup, and that was enough comfort for me to leave that problem to another day. I made sure to use the bathroom around back before going back up to my room. I didn't want to have to make the hike in the middle of the night again. While I was using the restroom, I peered out into the woods several hundred yards away. I wasn't sure how long I would be able to keep up the abandoned apartment situation, so I briefly considered checking out the woods as a backup if I were to be found. Again, that would be another task that I would save for daylight. The woods seemed just as terrifying as the dark basement below. I went back inside, flashlight in hand. As I approached the stairwell, I noticed that on the ground, dark streaks of a mysterious liquid leading down the stairs. The stains mixed with the unfinished floor looked ominous. It was hard to tell what exactly it was, but didn't like what I was seeing. I turned my light off as I entered the stairway, as to not alert who was below. I made sure to be quiet, but my pace was quicker than what it probably should have been. I opened the 3rd floor door and locked it behind me. I did a quick inspection of the 3rd floor as a safety precaution, but everything looked how I left it. I was tired from all the walking. Mainly having to carry all my stuff around and setting up my room took all my energy. I laid on my air mattress and closed my eyes, trying not to think about anything as sleep began to grab hold of my consciousness when a faint noise jarred me awake. It was subtle, but my mind, being on high alert, was able to detect movement down below. Normally, I wouldn't have heard whatever was down beneath rummaging around, but since the complex didn't have windows to insulate the noise, I could clearly hear the sound of someone walking around. The shuffling wasn't terribly loud, but whatever it was clearly working its way up the complex. What concerned me wasn't the noise itself, but rather how things sounded. There was a hint of stealth in the movements, like whoever it was didn't want to be detected. I followed the sounds beneath me as I laid in darkness. I lost track of where they had went when they were over near the stairwell. I sat up on my mattress and looked in the direction of the stairwell. Did I lock the door to the stairs? I thought. I had been so busy that day that it was very likely I forgot. I got up slowly, doing my best to keep my sound low. In my hurry, I only brought my flashlight to guide me through the dark halls. I quickly made it to the stairway door and tugged on the handle. I remembered. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned my light off. I sat by the door, my nerves slowly getting worked up. I need to stop overthinking, I whispered as I sat in silence after spending 15 minutes trying to locate the sound beneath me. I was ready to get up and head back to my bed when a jostling of the door handle startled me. Someone was outside of the door. A brief rustling on the handle shocked my anxiety as I sat in darkness. I could hear someone talking to themselves, but the handle had stopped shaking. Whoever was on the other side had stopped their attempt to gain entry but still stood outside the door. I stared at the door, petrified of what would happen if the door lock no longer held. Would it be just another person like me, seeking refuge and wanting to spend the night with a roof over their head, or was this something else? The person on the other side of the door left the door almost immediately but still stayed within the complex. Fear gripped me to that door, not allowing me to move. It was clear that this building had another uninvited guest, but that wouldn't last. As I was debating on how to proceed, I heard another sound, but this one didn't come from the other side of the door but beneath me. The piercing sound of a shriek filled the complex. Whoever had the misfortune of finding themselves on the lower levels began to shuffle around. They tried to get to the first floor, but I could hear a struggle, then more screaming coming from the stairway. The sound of commotion erupted. Screams of pain and terror echoed up the stairwell, but not for long. The screams quickly died and the sound of something being dragged slowly faded down into the basement below. I couldn't be sure, but it sounded as if I just heard a murder take place. I sat by the stairway all night, eyes wide. I couldn't bring myself to calm down enough to enjoy the luxury of sleep. When the sun finally rose, I found the courage to get up and head to my room. I didn't go outside that day despite having the urgent need of using the bathroom. I ended up using an empty room and designated that as my bathroom area until I figured out how to get out of this place. I had enough food and water to last me a couple of days, so I had time to figure out what I wanted to do. During the day, sleep finally overcame me and I drifted to a realm of peace, but that wouldn't last. I woke up later in the day. The sun was completely smothered behind rain clouds and loud rumblings of thunder rolled in the distance. I could hear a few droplets hit the roof and windowsill, a prelude of what was to come. The complex was much darker now. My flashlight was needed for just about everything. The day was only going to get darker, so I had to decide. Stay another night and hope that I can evade notice for 10 or so more hours, or sneak my way out of here. I grabbed the pistol and decided to try my luck. I packed up as much stuff as I could carry in one take and headed for the stairs. I made my way over to the door and unlocked it, my light beaming into the thick darkness below. I made sure to check the coast was clear before leaving my sanctuary. I slowly descended the stairs, doing my best to navigate the metal stairs while also keeping my noise down. I slowly completed the first flight of steps and nothing seemed out of place. On the second floor, my fears had been confirmed. I could see drag marks leading to the stairs with stains accompanying it. I wanted to check the second floor, but my nerves wouldn't allow it. The drag marks continued down the step, leaving thick stain of blood and bits and pieces of guts. This wasn't just a killing. This was a mutilation. Whoever had done this was disturbed and the last person I wanted to encounter in this dark stairway. I needed to leave. The rain had really begun to come down now. I would get soaked the second I stepped foot outside, but I had to do it. I was frustrated by those new developments since I would not be able to hear as well if something was heading towards my direction. I worked my way down to the first floor, but halfway down, my light reached something at the bottom of the stairs that stopped me cold in my tracks. Standing in the corner of the stairway next to the exit stood an absolute horrid creature, stood hunched facing the corner. My light only caught the lower half of the figure before I turned off my light, but it was enough for me to piece it together. The brief moment of horror revealed something blocking my exit. Had it not been standing, I would have that it was rotted corpse. Flesh peeled from what limbs I could see and bone appeared to jet out of the lower spine. I didn't get to see the rest of it and I'm kind of glad I didn't. I held my breath as my heart began to race. I was immersed in darkness with whatever this thing was about a dozen or so feet away from me. Rain and thunder continued outside, now thankfully concealing my sound. I couldn't see anything, but what little I could hear, it didn't sound like it had moved. I stood petrified on the stairs, knowing fully well I wasn't going to make it out of here this way, at least in one piece. In moments like this, you don't really think clearly. You can only think of survival and nothing else. I had never seen anything like this before. I wasn't sure what kind of gun I had or if it would even affect this creature in any meaningful way, but I wasn't going to test it. I began to backstep up the stairs awkwardly. My hands were full and my heavy pack made the unnatural backpedaling even more difficult. I I went for another step back and my shoe didn't clear the step and I fell backwards. Out of reaction I dropped my gun and flashlight to brace myself, reaching out for non-existent handle rails to catch my fall. The thud of the heavy flashlight on the metal stairs clamored loudly as it fell down the stairs, echoing in the stairwell. I gasped. A shock of anxiety and dread flooded my system. Without a doubt I had gained the attention of whatever lurked just beneath me. I dropped my backpack to lighten my load and felt around for the gun. Shrieks filled the complex as an odd twist of event. It would appear that I had startled whatever was down there. I could hear shuffling beneath me. Its attention focused briefly on the flashlight that came to a stop, buying me precious time to find my only weapon to defend myself. I felt around, my hands patting the ground, feeling the still wet stains of the drag marks from earlier. I was so focused on finding the gun I hadn't noticed the creature was no longer interested in the flashlight and had begun ascending the stairs. Finally I felt something solid and gripped it tightly. It took me a few moments to orient myself with the weapon, but before I could I was tackled on the ground. Immediately, I felt sharp pain in my side as I was now being attacked. I could feel claws begin to slash on my outer coat and heavy pressure on my chest. I pressed the barrel in the direction I heard shrieking and felt something solid. I pulled the trigger 3 times and my hand knocked back from the power. The gun bursts briefly illuminated the area, and flashes of images haunted my vision. I could briefly see in those very few moments what appeared to be a decomposing demon. It was so quick and I was in so much pain that I wasn't able to process everything right then. The pressure relieved off my chest as it seemed I had injured my attacker. However, I still heard movement squirming around on the ground and loud horrifying screams. I left the gun in my backpack with stuff and ran past the sounds of shuffling. I went to the stairs and went as quickly as I could without falling in the dark. The pain in my side seemed to disappear as adrenaline began to pump into my system. I made it to the first floor and I kicked the flashlight that I had dropped earlier. I picked it up and turned it on and ran out of there. I left the complex with whatever that was still screaming inside. The warm rain slowly drenching me the further I jogged away. The screams never did stop. They just muffled the further I went off into the dark rainy night. As I got a good distance away, a part of me considered looking back to see if my demonic attacker was pursuing me, but not looking back would be a risk I was willing to take. I got forced to hang out with Abel every neighborhood had. That one weird kid. For us, it was Abel Casey. He was a 14-year-old, skinny, tall kid with shoulder-length pitch black hair and bangs that covered his eyes. His presence always felt off-putting. Even with the smile he always wore on his face, some of us felt uncomfortable being near him. Nobody ever talked to him, and by the chance someone even bothered trying to, he would drive them away by trying to base the conversation around the same topic: skulls. Whether human skulls or animal skulls, he'd talk about skulls nonstop. Some kids rumor about how he goes to graveyards to dig up skulls and take them home. Others joked about how he probably held a shrine dedicated to skulls in his bedroom. Overall, Abel was an outcast we avoided at all costs. Otherwise, we'd have to deal with his weird obsession with skulls. It became one of our neighborhood rules: don't interact with Abel under any circumstances. So Abel was the last person I wanted to spend my entire Saturday with. I wanted to spend it hanging out with my friends, not with him. But my mom insisted on it. I tried to explain that Abel was flat out creepy and made me and every other kid uncomfortable, but she didn't listen. I pleaded with her, trying to get her to rethink this, but she told me I was visiting him, which was final. I groaned in annoyance. We went to Abel's house and my mom rang the doorbell. The door opened and who I assumed was Abel's mom stepped out. She looked even weirder than Abel. She had long, wavy, dark hair the same color as Abel's and was slightly paler than him. My mom talked to her briefly, explaining how she wanted me to hang out with Abel. Abel's mom lit up, and I could see the excitement on her face. She was ecstatic, telling us that Abel never had any real friends, meaning he would probably love someone visiting him. I rolled my eyes, annoyed as they chatted. It wasn't like I wanted to be with Abel in the first place. The last thing I needed was someone spotting me, and I'd probably get ostracized too. Not as much as Abel, but still. My mom told me she'd pick me up at 7. As she left, Abel's mom welcomed me inside with a smile. As I entered the house, I noticed strange decorations on the walls. They were odd pieces of bone attached to a string and spread across the walls. Some of the skulls even had dots of paint on them. Excuse me, Miss Casey?" I said. She looked down at me with that same smile. "Yes, sweetie? What's with the skulls?" I asked, pointing at them. She giggled. "Don't mind those, that's just a special decoration." I raised my eyebrow. I was about to ask her but decided not to. His mom was already creeping me out. She brought me to Abel's bedroom and gently knocked on his door. He calmly opened the door. Abel, sweetheart. Someone's come to visit. This is Vincent, she introduced. As she finished her sentence, a smile bloated on Abel's face. She gestured for me to step inside and then closed the door. Be nice to one another. I must admit that Abel's bedroom was better than I assumed. It was well cleaned and put together. Only he had several detailed skull drawings pinned to his wall. Additionally, there were those weird skull decorations. I put one hand behind my head, not knowing what to say to him. So, it began. So what? I asked, becoming slightly creeped out by him. So glad someone came to visit me? He said softly. The silence was deafening and uncomfortable. Then Abel broke the silence. Do you want to read some comics? I blinked in surprise at what he said. Comics? I asked. He nodded his head in excitement. Yeah. He went to his bed, reached under it, and pulled out a stash of different comic books. He was the last kid I expected to read comics. We spent the rest of the afternoon reading as I flipped a page through Injustice number 29. Abel says something that causes me to stop reading. Vincent, did you know that the function of the skull is both structurally supportive and protective? I blinked as the question registered in my head. I turned to face him. What? I asked, still confused about what Abel just requested. Abel looked over at me and smiled. Just a random fact. He turned and continued reading his comic, and I did the same. But my confusion remained. 5 minutes later, Abel asked a question out of the blue again. Vincent, did you know that the glabella is a key midline landmark of the frontal bone? I looked at Abel, getting even more confused at what he said. I don't understand, I answered, but Abel just laughed, almost expecting my puzzlement. It represents the anterior part of the forehead when standing perfectly erect and looking straight ahead. I still didn't understand what he was saying at all. This was what an adult would understand, not a literal 13-year-old. How do you even know that stuff? I questioned him, and Abel's smile only widened. My dad taught me. He taught me everything about skulls, he beamed. Then it dawned on me. Where is your dad? I inquired, suddenly realizing I hadn't seen him anywhere, only Abel's mom. Abel went silent and his smile dropped. He stared at me. That uncomfortable silence returned, and it felt even worse now. It felt as if I had asked a question I shouldn't have. I wanted to break the silence or change the subject to something else, but that couldn't work. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, Abel's smile returned. You'll meet him soon, he whispered. Let me get some lemonade for us. Then he exited his room. Abel's reaction was still ingrained in my head, and I was still confused by what he said. It was like I struck a nerve with him. Abel returned with 2 glasses of lemonade. I hesitated on drinking one, but Abel insisted I do. Don't worry, it tastes great, he assured. And he was right. It was some good lemonade. It tasted so sweet and amazing. We continued reading for half an hour. As I finished the comic I was reading, I noticed Abel staring at me again. What? I asked. Abel beamed at me and then spoke. Come over here, I want to show you something. He answered. Reluctantly, I followed him to the bottom of his bed. Abel reached under and started searching for something. It took him longer than when he got the comics, and he excitedly gasped as if he found what he was looking for. He then quickly took it out and my heart skipped a beat. He was holding a skull. An actual human skull. There was also a large crack on it. Wah. I mumbled. Yeah. This is a special skull. Do you want to know why it's special? Abel inquired, but I didn't want to know. My peers were right, this kid was out of his mind. My body began trembling as I quickly got up to my feet and to leave and never come back here ever again, but as I finished that thought, I felt myself become lightheaded. My vision blurred in and out, and I saw Abel's excited smile before everything darkened. I woke up grass, my mouth felt dry and my head was dizzy. Looking up, I saw Abel and his mom standing over. Happy grins were painted over their faces. Abel was carrying the same skull he showed me in his bedroom. Vincent, I want to thank you so much for how you treated my son, Abel's mom began. Usually he tells me most of the other kids don't treat him well, but you're different. She smiled. And because of that, Abel said, I want to introduce you to my dad. They both stepped to the side, revealing an eagle skull on the grass. It looked like it was in clean condition too. Confusion filled my head. I opened my mouth to question them, but immediately noticed something happening to the skull. A large amount of black liquid began quickly leaking from it. A puddle of the black liquid expanded underneath the skull until it stopped suddenly. Then the black liquid seemed to morph and change as if it was being sculpted like clay. I will never forget the sound of bones cracking and popping as the black liquid seemed to take the form of a large adult male. It stared at me for a few seconds before walking towards me. Droplets of the black liquid fell off as it approached me. Abel and his mom's eyes were now wide, along with their grins. Upon stopping at my trembling body, it leant out its hand. "Hello, I am his father, it is a pleasure to meet you," the thing said distortedly. Disbelief and panic mixed inside me. I pinched myself thinking I was dreaming. But I wasn't. This was real. "No. No way." I whispered, "Yes way." Abel giggled. I continued staring at the thing that had just claimed to be Abel's dad, my words becoming incoherent as they escaped my mouth. It retracted its hand and then cleared its throat, bubbles of the black liquid gurgled up through his neck. "I know this is shocking to you at first," it began. "I know your heartbeat increases with every second you look at me. But do not fret, I do not enjoy pain. Nor am I violent." I was panting through bated breaths. I wanted to speak but couldn't muster up a complete sentence. I could only say one word. "How?" The thing chuckled at my response. "Well, you see, I was once a normal man with a splendid job as a craniologist and a loving family." He gestured towards Abel and his mother. "Everything was wonderful, my life was pure and fulfilling, until some filthy hooligan ran a red light, and then he hit me." I could feel the hatred and venom dripping from its voice. It took a deep breath, picking up the composure he dropped. The despair and anger I held within me was agonizing, to say the least. It continued, "I was trapped in darkness, thinking I would never return to my family ever again, but fortunately that wasn't the case." It turned towards Abel holding the cracked skull. "See, my wife and son had tracked down the driver who had taken my life, and let's just say they avenged me." The smile in his voice was clear, and I saw Abel proudly grin at the thing. "It took a long time, but eventually I was reborn anew, all thanks to my beautiful, lovely Patricia." The smile never left its voice as it turned its gaze towards Abel's mom. Abel's mom only giggled as her cheeks blushed. I didn't know how to comprehend any of this. My thoughts were split into confusion and panic. The thing turned its gaze on me, its soulless eyes pierced mine. The thing took a step toward me and I backed away. "Believe me, Vincent, this may seem too difficult to process, but you will understand. I am happy that you were nice to my son. My wife told me most of the children in this neighborhood weren't very welcoming to his interests, but I am happy you saw past that." It told me. "Yeah, sure," I thought but didn't say it out loud. I was already scared for my life at the sight of whatever this thing was. "Heed this warning though," the thing hissed, and I heard
The House of Lies by Crazed Frog the Wood Floor creaks as the Garway children run through the halls, laughing and jumping. Mr. Garway hugs his wife and smiles to himself, thinking of how all of his hard work paid off. After countless hours of wasting away writing book after book, trying to make it big, he finally did it. His book made a list posted by the New York Times titled Top 25 Most Underrated Books of 2015, finally offering him enough money to buy a beautiful house tucked back in the woods of Massachusetts to encourage his writing and to offer his kids the life he couldn't have growing up in New York City. As they unpack the final boxes, the feeling sets in with everyone. Mrs. Garway feels relieved that they're done. Mr. Garway feels satisfied that his work has passed away, and the two Garway children are excited that they have endless woods to explore as they age. All of them were ignorant to the whispers that travel from mouth to ear and ear to mouth of the citizens of Richardson, Massachusetts. The Garways were faithful people, good people who gave back to their community. The true, modern-day nuclear family. Mrs. Garway quickly found a new job working as a traveling real estate agent, picking up right where she left off in Boston. Every couple of weeks, Mrs. Garway would pack her bags, kiss the kids on their forehead, and say goodbye to the small town of Richardson to sell a house far beyond the state lines. But while she was away, Mrs. Garway's faithfulness disappeared. Each city she stayed in, night after night, she brought a new man back to the hotel room, trying to fill the sex life she didn't have at home due to Mr. Garway's obsession with writing. After the house was sold, she would go back home and kiss her husband on the mouth with the same lips that were on another man's just the night before. After months of this cycle, Mr. Garway began to question why after 8 p.m. her phone would go dark, and why her clothes smelled like cologne when she got back home. Mrs. Garway would shrug it off and say something along the lines of, Oh, well, it must have just been one of the clients at the open house. Or there must have been a man that stayed in my room before I was there. Her lies echoed through the halls and soaked into the walls, hopefully to be forgotten. But lies aren't forgotten at the house tucked away in the woods of Richardson, Massachusetts. After every one of Mrs. Garway's trips, Mr. Garway's unease built. The scent of cologne clinging onto her clothes would hit him like a train. The unspoken conviction of her actions picked away at his mind more and more. The atmosphere of the home felt like moving through concrete for him. He knew the truth, but could not confront it. That was until her most recent trip, when the smell of cologne was paired with her near constant smiling at her phone. That night, while he helped the children with their multiplication homework, he overheard Mrs. Garway on the phone, her voice low and secretive. "I can't keep doing this," she said, with a nervous chuckle. The sound tightened his chest with pain and sadness. That night, as they were crawling into bed, Mr. Garway stopped and looked deep into her eyes. "I know what you're up to," he said. "I am done playing this game of naivety. I could smell him on you the second you walked in the door." Mrs. Garway's face tightened, her mask slipping. "You're ridiculous. Stop imagining things," she shot back, but her words sounded hollow, lacking conviction. "Bullshit. I can't keep pretending like you're the same women I married," he said with the weight of all of her lies he has been shouldering. Silence hung between them, thick with tension. The walls seemed to shrink in around them, as if they were reacting to the tension. Mr. Garway, between his angry thoughts, could have sworn to feel the floorboards shift underneath him. Mrs. Garway tried to respond, but her voice faltered. She quickly turned her head to hide the swelling tears in her eyes. "Stop it. You're being ridiculous," she finally said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Mr. Garway took a step towards her, his face hot with anger and his heart pounding from adrenaline. "No! What's ridiculous is that you think I'm supposed to believe that the smell of a new cologne lingers on you whenever you get home from work trips." The lights flickered as they faced each other. "I am working hard for this family," she snapped back. "I don't have the time for your paranoia." "Working hard. Is that what you call sleeping with other men constantly?" He snapped. "You just think that you know everything, don't you, Sherlock?" She snarled back. "Just tell me the fucking truth," he yelled. The air in the room became hot and thick, as if it was reacting to their heated accusations. "You want the truth? Fine. Maybe if you weren't so tied up trying to chase the high of your one-hit wonder book, I'd feel more attracted to you," she shouted. "But no, you just have to be the next Stephen fucking King. So you're admitting it? Just like that?" "All that we've built, gone just like that," he replied, his voice shaking. "No, I just want you to pay attention to me," she replied, her voice softening. He watched as she buried her face in her hands. Guilt flooded over him, because he knew she was right. He had been burying himself in his work, and had sacrificed personal relationships because of it. But this guilt did not last. Anger building up, he shouted, "I am trying to provide our children the best lives they can have." But before she could respond, a scream echoed from the kitchen. Instantly recognizing that scream as their daughter's, they immediately made a break for the kitchen. Mr. Garway burst through the door first, his heart racing. The room was dim, shadows clinging to the corners, and his eyes quickly scanned for their daughter. He found her crouched on the floor, trembling, staring wide-eyed at the space under the table. "What's wrong? What happened?" he yelled, the panic in his voice unmistakable. Their daughter pointed a shaking finger toward the wall, where a deep, dark stain had begun to spread, oozing from the cracks. "The wall, it's talking," she whimpered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mrs. Garway rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "Sweetheart, it's okay," she said, her voice trembling. "What do you mean it's talking?" "It said my name," their daughter cried, her small body shaking. "It said it knows all our secrets." A cold chill swept through the room, and Mr. Garway felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. He looked at the wall, the dark stain pulsing ominously, almost as if it were breathing. Stay there, sweetie. Daddy's gonna check it out, he replied, voice shaking. He stepped closer to the wall, heart pounding in his chest. As he reached out, the air thickened, a heavy weight pressing down on him. The stain twisted and turned, forming shapes that seemed to mock him. Whispers echoed in his ears, hundreds of voices filling his mind with deceit. Stop it! Get out of my head! He shouted, stumbling back, bumping into the kitchen table. Daddy! His daughter cried as he spun around to look at them. His wife and daughter watched with horrified expressions. Mom? Dad? What's happening down there? Their son's voice cried from upstairs. Panic surged through Mr. Garway. We have to get him, he shouted as he pulled his wife and daughter up and towards the stairs. The house shook around them, the walls seeming to rot away. As they dashed towards the stairs, the walls began to sink, bringing the ceiling slowly down. Get out now, he yelled to his daughter, pushing her towards the front door. Daddy, I'm scared, she sobbed. I'll be okay, sweetie. Get outside and wait for us there, he urged, forcing her towards the door. His daughter hesitated, glancing back at him. But what about you, Daddy? Just go, he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. The floor shifted beneath his feet. I promise I'll be right behind you. With a final, reluctant nod, she darted out into the night, the cool air washing over her. He turned back to his wife. We need to move, he said, pulling her along as they climbed the stairs, the will to save their son fueling their steps. Darting through the crumbling hallway, they finally reached their son's room. The door handle was hot to the touch, but that didn't stop Mr. Garway. With a swift kick to the door, the resistance gave. Buddy, we need to get out of here right now, he shouted as he ran into the room, lifting him into his arms. He turned to go for the door, but the ceiling had already taken over the hallways. We need to jump out the window, shouted Mrs. Garway, her voice filled with panic as she pointed towards their only escape. I don't want to die, cried their son. Don't worry, buddy, you won't. Not today, Mr. Garway shouted as he ran for the window. The air was thick with desperation, pressing down on them. As the house vibrated ominously, its walls pulsing like a heartbeat. Help me open it, Mr. Garway called to his wife, the urgency in his voice cutting through the panic. Together, they strained against the window. The frame warped and fought back against their might. Come on, Mrs. Garway yelled, her hands trembling, slick with sweat as she pushed against the window. Just a little more. I can feel it, he replied, gritting his teeth as he put all his strength into it, desperate for their escape. It's almost there. With one last heave, the window finally gave way, swinging open to reveal the dark night outside. Fresh air rushed in, but it was tainted with the scent of sweet decay from the house. Mr. Garway quickly set his son down, kneeling to meet his tear-filled eyes. Listen to me, buddy, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. You can do this. Climb out and grab onto that tree. He pointed to the sturdy branches that hung just outside, his only option. But what about you? Their son pleaded, his small voice shaking as tears streamed down his cheeks. I'll be right behind you, Mr. Garway promised, though his heart twisted with uncertainty. You just need to trust me. I'll always come for you. The boy hesitated, his small hands trembling on the windowsill. I don't want to leave you, Dad, he whispered. I know, Mr. Garway said, his own throat tightening as he fought to hold back tears. But we need to be brave. If we stick together, we'll get out of this, I swear. He ruffled his son's hair gently, trying to instill a sense of courage. With a shaky breath, their son nodded. Okay, Dad, I'll go, he said, and with that he climbed up, finding his footing on the windowsill. Good boy, Mr. Garway said. Now, climb down and get to your sister. I'll be right behind you. Mr. Garway turned, making eye contact with his wife. A look of understanding passed between them. Mr. and Mrs. Garway knew that they would not be able to make it out in time. So in their final moments they embraced. "I love you, baby," said Mr. Garway. "I love you, honey," Mrs. Garway responded as the house enveloped them, forever keeping them trapped within the walls of their beautiful house tucked away in the woods of Richardson, Massachusetts. So I used to work at an old antique shop in Michigan. It was run by an old lady named Joanna, 74F, and her daughter Sarah, 44F. To give context, Joanna was born in 1950, and in 1975 was when she moved out of her parents' house and into an apartment complex in Traverse City. She lived in that apartment complex for 5 years until the apartment building lost funding, and so everyone had to leave, and the building was demolished around that time Joanna met her husband Dave, 26M. They ended up getting married, and Joanna decided that she wanted to make her own business. Dave supported that, and she said she knew where to start. She went to the old lot where the apartment complex was, and she bought the lot and ended up making an antique shop that was also her house, ended up living in that antique shop for 30 years, and then they had Sarah. 10 years later, Dave, 36, said to Joanna, 34, that he was going to the bank to take some money out to go pay for the expenses on the building. About 2 hours later, Joanna got a call from the police saying that Dave was killed in a car accident. She was devastated to get the news. She didn't know how to handle it. She thought that she was going to have to shut the business down. But years went by, and when Sarah turned 16, she ended up helping Joanna with the business. Joanna is now 74, and Sarah is 44 years old. Joanna was a real workhorse. Anytime someone said, "What happens if this building shuts down?" she's always said, in a kind of mean demeanor, "This place will never shut down, not on my behalf." So I, 24M, worked at the antique shop for 3 years. We also have another employee, Christy, 19F, was helping us out with the store. Everything was going great until 2 weeks ago. Because Joanna had died from a heart attack in the antique shop in her office, Sarah was in shambles for the day. She didn't come to work. She was dealing with the funeral preparations, and then a couple of days later Sarah said that she was going to close down the store, sell the property, and move to Minnesota. I asked her if she was really doing this, and she said yes. She didn't deal with her parents being gone, so she wanted to try and make a fresh start. We packed up most of the stuff. For about 5 days, we were going to sell it to another antique shop, which then cuts till last night. To give a little context about myself, I have some really bad insomnia. Haven't gotten any sleep in the past 3 days, and it's been really hard for me to sleep. I would still hear my fan running, my mom's TV, going, the dogs going in and out of the house when they had to pee, so it was really hard. I woke up that morning and was trying to figure out how to get some sleep and see what would happen. Sarah, who was on her way back to Minnesota after looking at a house, texted me at 8 p.m. and the message went like this: Sarah, "Hey, I'm sorry to bother, but I got some bad news." Me. "What's the bad news, Sarah?" "It's going to take me another 10 hours to get back to Michigan, and Christy is sick with the flu. I still need to get the bottom floor done. I know you said you were trying to get some sleep a couple of days ago, so I was wondering if you could go in during the middle of the night and continue to pack. I pay you double." Me. "Are you sure you don't have to pay me double?" "It's fine, Sarah." "No, it's okay. You've been really helpful, and I might as well since this is the last time we'll be seeing each other." Me. "Okay, I'll be there around there at 10 p.m. Is the key still inside the land and outside?" Sarah. "Yeah, it's still there. Just make sure to put it back when you can. Thank you so much, Dustin." Me. "No problem. I'll see you soon." As I got ready and headed out the door. It took me around 30 minutes to get to the antique store. As I got to the store, I could see there were only a few more things that needed to be packed, so I started packing. I was listening to music while I was at it, just anything to get my mind going as I was packing, as I had to finish packing. It took me around for hours, which was until 12, and I started feeling tired. Maybe my insomnia was finally starting to subside, so I thought maybe I shouldn't heading be home. I'm tired. So I decided maybe I'd just fall asleep at the antique store. I didn't want to go into Joanne's room because it was already pretty much packed up, and there was nothing up there. So I found an air mattress in the storage room, and I decided to pump it and fall asleep there. As I was continuing to pump the air mattress, I heard a loud thud. Coming from upstairs, I know that no one else was in the building, so I went up there. As I walked to the stairs and opened the door, one of the boxes was tipped over and everything had fallen out of it. The window was open, so I'm guessing the wind blowing over. So I ended up picking the box back up and putting stuff back in it. As I put the box back in place, it was the door slammed behind me again, thinking that maybe it was a wind as I went to open it. It wouldn't budge. Every time I turned the knob, it wouldn't open. And then I heard a phone ringing. There was a phone on the desk in Joanna's room. But the phone wasn't plugged in, so how could it be ringing? I started to think I was losing my mind, sew it up. And I heard the voice was saying, "You never should have come back here." I responded, "What do you mean, and who is this?" The voice replied, saying, "You think you can take from me everything I worked for. You're just going to take it all away. I'm not going to allow you to do that." I started to realize that it was Joanna's voice. I started to think that I was going crazy. How could she be calling me? The phone hung up. I didn't know what to do, so I ran back to the door and tried to get out, but I couldn't, and I heard a voice from behind me saying, "You're not going anywhere." As I turned around, I saw a dark shadow silhouette behind me with bright red eyes, staring at me. I kept trying to kick the door open. It was getting closer and closer until eventually the door fell off its hinges as my foot was being pushed forward. I missed a step and fell down the stairs, sprayed my ankle in the process. I got up and hobbled my way out of the store, into my car, and drove far enough, driving to the nearest hospital to check up on my leg. It was really bad. They told me I needed to stay here for the rest of the night. They could tell that I was visibly tired. So they took me to one of the rooms. They put a brace on my leg, and I was able to sleep that night. Once I woke up, I kept on thinking, what is that real? Was all that real, or was that my imagination from being so sleep-deprived? It was around 6 a.m., and that's when Sarah called me and asked me if someone had broken into the store. I said no. I said I was going to be there soon because we needed to talk. The ER was able to let me out, so I went back to the antique store. As I got there, Sarah waiting for me. Outside, as I got there, Sarah asked me what happened. So I took her upstairs and told her everything that happened, and she didn't believe me. She thought I was going crazy. I said, I don't know if I'm going crazy, but all I know is that whatever happened, happened, and I don't know. Sarah told me to take a breath. Maybe your brain was messing with you that night. Okay, but listen, go home and rest, okay? Christy told me that she's feeling better, so she's going to come and help me pack everything up and put it in the truck. So just go home and get some sleep, okay? I said sure, and then went home. I ended up falling asleep for about an hour, and then I got a call from Christy. Christy was crying profusely. I said what was going on and what happened. Christy said Sarah had hung herself in Joanna's room. Christy said she called the cops and the ambulances as fast as she could, but she was already dead by the time they got there. I said, how did this happen? Christy said she didn't know. The only thing she saw in there was the phone on the table, but the phone was hanging from the cord on the ground. I know what happened. Joanna killed her. Maybe she possessed Sarah and hung her. And I kept thinking to myself, was I supposed to die that night? Was Joanna supposed to kill me? Peter awoke to the sound of uneven tapping on his bedroom window. In a groggy haze, he rolled over on his side to check the time, letting out a groan. The clock next to his bed read just past midnight. He rolled back over, closing his eyes, hoping that the sound would go away and he could return to sleep. But that wasn't the case. The tapping at his window grew louder and more rapid. Pulling back the covers, Peter reluctantly stepped out of bed to check on the sound. He gently rubbed his arms, surprised by the cold summer night. Still not awake, he stumbled over to the window. Tap, 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 the rhythmic tapping against the window, like some persistent solicitor at the front door. Leaning over, Peter brought his face close to the window. Rubbing at his eyes, he let out a yawn as his brain made sense of what he was seeing through the foggy glass. There was a familiar face, standing right outside his bedroom, tapping at the window with his finger. It took a minute for Peter's brain to catch up, realizing that the shirtless man outside was his father. With his eyes half open, Peter let out another yawn. What normally should have been a confusing sight felt like a surreal dream, and everything always seemed to make sense in his dreams. At least until he awaked. Tap, tap. Tap, his father continued rapping at the window. What are you doing outside, Dad? It's late. I know it's late and it's cold out. Let me back inside already. His father's voice seemed soothing and calm despite the furious tapping at the window. Sure, Dad. Peter stammered out, pushing up on the window frame. The window creaked. holding firmly in place. He looked at the window, confused that somehow it could have bested him. Outside, his father moved his hand up to the middle of the window, continuing his rhythmic tapping at the window lock. "Oh, right," Peter muttered to himself, reaching for the lock. Touching the freezing cold metal latch sent a chill through his spine, shocking him awake. The dreamy atmosphere shattered in an instant. The moment felt wrong. Why was his father outside? Dread crept into the back of his throat. His father had died 3 months ago. Breaking out into a cold sweat, Peter took a step back from the window. "Peter, open the window," the man shouted, losing his calm demeanor, tapping angrily at the window. "No," Peter whispered, taking another step away from the window. The man that looked like his father let out a hideous inhuman sequel as his upper body seized up. His face twisted and contorted into a pained expression. Reeling back from the window, the man threw his head back with a snap. A line formed down the man's neck as his body pulled apart down the middle, revealing a maw of teeth. The creature's entire body vibrated as it let out a high-pitched yelling, running at full speed into the tree line behind Peter's house. Collapsing to the ground, Peter sat in a slump, staring out the window. There would be no more sleeping tonight, or for many more nights to come. "There's someone in your house." The place was cheap, old, and smelled like dust mixed with something stale. Perfect for a guy like me, just trying to escape for a while. At first, everything seemed fine, but after a couple of weeks, I started noticing odd things. A toothbrush appeared in the bathroom. An apple sat on the counter, half-eaten. Each morning, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke, even though I hadn't smoked in years. I laughed it off, thinking maybe I was just paranoid. Then, things started going missing. A fork here, a pillow there. Each morning, I'd find a slice of bread gone. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew something was off. One night, after a long shift, I flopped into bed. The sheets felt warm, almost like someone had just been lying there. My heart raced. I gripped my kitchen knife like it was a lifeline, trying to shake off the creeping dread. The next night, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, careful. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I climbed up into the attic, each creak of the stairs sounding like a warning. The air was thick with a sour smell that made me gag. My flashlight flickered over piles of blankets and crumpled wrappers. Then I saw it, a stack of photos of me, taken from the shadows, capturing moments I didn't even know I was being watched. Panic hit me like a brick. The notebooks were worse, filled with notes about my daily routine, even what I ate for breakfast. One line made my skin crawl. Sat on his bed while he slept, almost woke him. I ran, bolting from the house and leaving everything behind. I thought I could put it all behind me. But when the cops searched the place, they found him living inside the walls, watching me for who knows how long. They showed me a final notebook he'd left open in the attic. The last page was filled with the same sentence over and over. "I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet." I thought moving across town would help. I thought I could forget. But last night, I felt the bed shift next to me. I was wide awake, frozen in fear, heart pounding against my chest. Then I heard it, a soft breath, barely there, right behind me. I could feel the weight of it, like a shadow pressing down on me. "I'm right here," it whispered, the voice like ice sliding down my spine. In that moment, I realized I hadn't escaped at all. He was still with me, lurking in the corners of my mind, and I knew it would never stop. LooneyFan 1990 was a very weird YouTube channel, to say the least. The person behind the channel, known as Josiah Long, would only post on weekends, posting 3 videos every Saturday and Sunday. Obviously, if the username is anything to go by, he's an obvious Looney Tunes fan, with Bugs Bunny as his profile picture. His content usually ranged from straight-up clips from Looney Tunes shorts to weird animation parodies he did of Looney Tunes. Usually, His animations were surrealist and or edgy retellings of known Looney Tunes episodes. Think Yellow Submarine meets Vivzy Pop. Let's just say the amount of swears won't fly with YouTube nowadays. I myself found the channel through a friend on Discord, who I'll keep anonymous out of respect for their boundaries. I've always found Josiah's content weird due to its surrealist nature and edgy dark humor. One joke in particular was the KKK shooting at the darkness of a cave because the dark is the color black. I hate to admit it, but I laughed. It served as good commentary as to how stupid and insane those KKK guys are. One parody, in particular, traumatized me when I was 13. It was called Elmer Season. The sky was an acid trip with a giant eye as the sun, and the trees looked like they were melting. It started Bugs and Daffy, like a typical Elmer Fudd cartoon would. They were sitting on a log, smoking weed. Bugs: "Man, Doc, I'm so sick of Elmer Fudd hunting us." Daffy: "Yeah, me too. It's duck season 1 minute, wabbit season the next. It's like we're both at risk." Bugs: "I know. It's fucking me up, Daffy." "Me too, man." Elmer in this parody looked weird. He has a sharp tooth in his mouth with a Slipknot shirt on. But those aren't the only parts. He looked a little disproportionate in height, shorter than usual. His nose, for whatever reason, was purple. His eyes were also yellow. Bugs and Daffy didn't look that much better. They looked skinnier than usual, and Bugs had an acid bath shirt, with Daffy sporting a Metallica one. Bugs' gray fur looked like a darker gray than usual too. Both Bugs and Daffy turned Elmer. Elmer: "Be viewy quiet, I'm hunting wabbits." Bugs rolled his eyes and said this. Bugs: "Oh shit, it's Elmer." Elmer: "That's white, and it's wabbit season, Bugs." "Actually, bitch, it's duck season." Daffy: "Oh fuck no, it's wabbit season." Bugs and Daffy do their usual routine of duck season, wabbit season, like in actual Looney Tunes. It continues until they swap. Bugs: "Wabbit season." Daffy: "Duck season. Fire." Elmer fires his gun. Now! In normal Looney Tunes, Daffy's bill would be in a different position after Daffy gets blasted. Here, in this parody, Daffy's face gets blasted to gore, horrifying Bugs half to death. Bugs: "Daffy Dash." Daffy's blood was rainbow colored with sparkles, and his skull was that of a human. Let me repeat that. Not a duck, but a human skull. A real photo of one, in fact. Watching that, 13 years old me was shocked. I've watched Looney Tunes with my uncle before, but I've never seen anything like this at the time. I mean, nowadays, I'm obviously desensitized to stuff like this in animation, but kid me was never the same. Elmer laughed coldly as he said this. Elmer: "Well, looks like it was duck season after all. Well, see ya, siwy bitches." Elmer leaves the screen as Bugs stares, horrified. Daffy just made slurping and gurgling noises at Bugs in response before pulling out a meatball sub, also a real photo, seemingly offering it to Bugs. Bugs' eye twitches as he whimpers out the words, "That wasn't supposed to happen." Daffy just tilts his head, seemingly confused. Bugs just stares at the screen for a few seconds before he shakes and smiles impossibly wide. I'll tell you, kid me was confused. Remember when I said I was never the same after I saw Daffy get absolutely gored? Well, that wasn't the most dramatic part. This was much worse than that. Bugs Bunny, the icon, the very face of WB, eating Elmer's organs, berating him for hurting Daffy, blaming himself for it too. Elmer's only responses were moans of pain as Bugs continued his gory feast. Bugs: "Why did you do it? Why did I have to pull our usual routine? I'm such a fucking idiot for letting Daffy get hurt that way. Why didn't I be the one to get shot? Why? Why? Fucking why?" I did not believe what I was seeing. I felt frozen and unable to move. I could only stare as Bugs continued his crash out. Bugs stared at the screen again after his gory feast blood, soaking his fur, breathing heavy. Bugs had that impossible smile again after a while, his pupils very tiny. The only sound, a very weird version of the Looney Tunes theme song, and backwards laughing. After seeing that, I couldn't take it. I X'd off the window, making it go away, and began crying hard. My mom ran up to my room and asked me what was wrong. When I showed her the video, she was horrified. I had to have my mom watch me as I used the computer for a while since the incident. Nowadays, my internet access is more or less unrestricted now. When I tried to search up LooneyFan 1990 out of curiosity, the channel was gone either because YouTube caught up to it or because Josiah deleted it for personal reasons. Part of me felt a little sad because a part of my childhood was gone, but a part of me also felt like I was free because I can no longer be subjected to the video that gave me nightmares as a kid. One question still lingers though. Why did Josiah make this? The previous homeowner's journals. Hello everyone. I recently purchased a new home. It's newly renovated and in a prime location. However, the previous homeowners left the house a mess. Apparently, they were in a rush and left a lot of their crap behind. While tossing out their stuff, some notebooks, scraps of paper, and other junk fell out of a box, and you can say curiosity got the best of me. I decided to read through some of it. The first couple of notepads were filled with notes and electrical stuff. I guess the previous owner was an electrician or something. However, right before I was ready to call it quits and toss it all out, I came across a notebook with a short story in it. I noticed that throughout all the notebooks and pads, there were random jots and blurbs. Some of the writing is rushed and hard to read, but as I pieced the story together, I decided I'd share it here. It's all a mess though. A lot of writing was probably done in the spur of the moment. Sadly, we never got to meet the sellers at closing, so we won't be able to give this back. They apparently had already left the state before we closed. Anyway, I'll be releasing the story as I compile it. Let me know what you think, and if you think you know the authors, please let me know. I'd love to return their work. Anyway, here it is. Chapter 1. The dream. My cheeks twitched slightly as the black haze of sleep started to lift. A soft groan left my throat as I stretched my neck to a more comfortable position. I heard my wife moving as well, the comfortable shuffling sound that bed sheets make. She just couldn't seem to get comfortable though, as the grogginess cleared up and sleep was leaving me entirely. "Are you okay?" I mumbled, putting my arm around her, annoyed that my sleep was ruined. My waking ears kept twitching as they focused in on the sound. It was a soft shuffling sound. Swish, pull, step, swish, pull, step. Maybe my wife Celine was going to the bathroom, I thought, as I gently tightened my arms around her warm, tender frame. My eyes jutted open and my body tensed. I felt my skin crawl as my brain shocked itself awake. My mind began spinning with realization. Even if she was shuffling to the bathroom, our master bathroom is right here, right in front of the bed. That isn't much of a walk, and she's lying right next to me, in my arms, gently snoring, not moving a single inch. My ears zoned in. Was this a mouse? An animal? No, this wasn't a mouse. It wasn't any kind of small animal. I don't have to be an audio expert with perfect hearing to know that this noise is not animalistic at all. After a few seconds, I realized we were being burglarized. Someone was in my home right now at this very moment. My home is a ranch. Everything is one floor. Celine and I are first-time homeowners and have been living here in perfect suburbia for 5 months, a stark contrast to our chaotic environment in the city. The house is practically open concept, with a hallway from the living room leading straight to our master bedroom. Admittedly, most sounds breaking the silence tend to scare us in our newfound environment. Our refrigerator loves popping out random ice cubes like mini gunshots, and Celine's been having it the hardest with random noises. This wouldn't be the first time something crazy has happened to us. And now I heard what sounded like shuffling in the living room. The creak and groan of our wood floors matched with the constant slow footsteps. It sounded like someone was searching around for something in short distances, an item that kept eluding them. I heard the pillows on the couch bump around and the coffee table move as my ears continued to zone in. My heart started to pound heavily, and I felt a tightness around my chest. Slowly and as quietly as possible, I leaned over to my nightstand and opened it to grab my handgun. As panic continued to swell in my chest, my wife started shifting and waking up, whether due to me or the intruder I don't know, and I quickly shushed her with my hand over her mouth. She's feisty and immediately gave me an angry look, probably more upset to be jarred awake. Celine tends to jump to conclusions without thinking, a headstrong woman with a strong personality. But she's also an amazing partner and knows exactly what to do when I'm serious. She motions to speak, but stays quiet once she notices the gun in my hand. There's someone in our living room, or at least I think. I whisper as lowly as I can, slowly and quietly heading over to unlock the bedroom door. I carefully open the door, leaving it slightly ajar to avoid making noise, and made my way down the hallway. My wife was sitting on the bed with her phone in hand, probably calling the police. In hindsight, I should have stayed in the bedroom and let the police handle the situation. However, I can be quite a brave idiot. My heart was pounding hard as a warm sensation of blood rushed to my face. Growing up in the city, I found myself in many dangerous situations, but I never could have realized how much more terrifying it was to have an intruder in your home in the early morning. As I crept closer, I saw the hunchback of a figure wearing a black tank top and baggy black shorts. My coffee table blocked the view from his calves down. The figure had pale white skin, seemingly Caucasian, maybe even albino, and its bent-over frame had its hands in the crevices of my couch. It wore either a tight black beanie or maybe it had a thick buzz cut. The distance was too far to be certain. I wondered what it expected to find in my couch. Certainly it wasn't looking for dust bunnies or loose change. Slowly walking closer, I aimed my firearm at the intruder. The floor creaked under me. He stood up quickly, startled, his head whipping in my direction to look directly at me as the rest of him slowly turned around. As he turned, everything about him seemed to shift, almost shimmering in the light streaming through the bay window blinds, as if he was made out of fine silver-colored sand. His pale skin tone shimmered to a tan tone, and a tattoo morphed on his chest and arms, mimicking the same tattoos on my upper body. I froze, staring at my doppelganger. His body was no longer albino in a black outfit, but instead was shirtless, wearing sweatpants with my messy bedhead and hairline, and holding something. I faced myself. I was holding a firearm, and he was holding what I perceived to be a firearm, but something about it looked off. I took a step. I took a step. I walked toward him. He did the same. I stopped a short distance away, and he mimicked me. My chest pounded as my reflection's face grew slightly red. I can only imagine that was how I looked. My breathing was calm yet heavy. So was his, but without the sound of breaths being taken. I took a step backward, aimed at him, and he mimicked each movement until he backed into the coffee table and fell. I took this opportunity and fired off 6 bullets into him, 5 making their mark. I almost feared I might feel the pain myself. My wife ran down the hall to see the scene unfolding. "Please tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing," I pleaded. My wife confirmed my sanity. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What the hell is that? What the hell is this? What is going on? Calm down." My mirror image screamed and I fired 2 more rounds into him. The silence stood heavy in the air. "That was not your voice," my wife stated as we watched blood pour out of him, more like sand flowing out of a vial than liquid. My body lurched forward as my name, Cashin, screamed out. My neck was punctured by 2 rows of teeth, and my doppelganger was standing back up. Fear immediately struck my heart as I went to grab the beam behind me, and beep, beep, beep. My morning alarm was going off. My heart was pounding, my body soaked in sweat. My wife groaned. "Turn off the alarm, Cashin." I turned off the alarm and stood up, the pounding in my chest dissipating as I realized that all I went through was a vivid dream. I checked the magazine to my firearm and counted 15 bullets. All was well, just a horrible dream. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and wrote every detail I remembered down as my wife woke up. I began telling Celine about the dream as I jotted it down in my brown notepad. Reliving it through speech actually helped with jotting everything down. That's got to mean something. Maybe we should play the lottery? Celine joked as she went to shower. Ah, Celine. She believes in astrology, mythical things, and that rocks and essential oils can influence a person or put them to sleep, but she won't believe me. We got prepared for work. I normally work remotely, but today I was heading down to Philadelphia for a survey. As I put my coat on and made my way toward the kitchen to make my morning coffee before heading to my car, I decided to take a moment and stare into the living room. Everything looked utterly normal. Nothing changed. No evidence of an attack. Nothing. Until something shiny caught my eye. And that, my friends, is what he has written down on the first page of this notebook. The next pages seem to be notes jotted down for an office in 16th and Market Street. No idea where that's at, though. If you'd like to hear more of this story, let me know. I think it's kind of creepy because I can personally visualize it a bit since, I live here and obviously this house was his inspiration. Edit. Hey! I decide to peek around the living room, and I notice a hole in the floor. It looks to be patched by someone putty and revarnished. Refinished? I don't know. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but could bullet holes be that easy to fix? I never owned a gun before. I only know about them from movies. Maybe it's actually just a knot in the wood, and I'm being paranoid. I think I'll be reading a bit more of these journals in case this is something else. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'll put a picture in the comments or something when I get a chance.